Everything begins in a life-or-death struggle where a human had defeated a powerful spirit beast, and after delivering the final blow, the human begins to cackle like the Joker. The spirit beast can hardly believe its eyes seeing that human laughing in a situation like that, and wonders if he is even human at all. The beast laments, as there was only 1 year left for it to finally achieve its ascension. It was so close to transforming into a legendary dragon, but everything had been cut short. It was 999 years of waiting ended in just a single moment. The creature laments the fact that humans brought talismans made specifically to eliminate divine beasts. It roars furiously, asking what the reason was for holding such a deep grudge against it. The warrior, exhausted and battered, calls it a fool. The fallen creature on the ground asks what he truly gained from all this destruction in the end. He replies that he does not care about those things because he only wanted to pay back his debt to his benefactor. Feeling the raindrops on his face, the warrior wonders if everything has finally come to an end right there. About to pass away, the creature hears a mysterious entity asking for its name. Furious, the beast asks who is speaking to it. After finally passing away, the spirit beast wonders if its destiny was just to disappear like this. However, he begins to hear a heartbeat and tries to understand where that sound is coming from. Without understanding anything, he wonders if he is still alive. He feels the heart beating and realizes that, although the energy of his Dantian is gone, there is still strength in his body. He reaches out his hand and realizes there is an invisible wall in front of him and concludes that this can only be a trap. He gets annoyed and questions if they thought that body would give up just because they sealed his Dantian. Immediately after, he breaks the barrier in front of him. After finally breaking that invisible barrier, the Prota is finally free, but he was completely wiped out and had almost no strength left to move. Looking around, he is puzzled trying to figure out where on Earth he ended up. Even from afar, one can see that the place is filled with extremely valuable magical and rare items. He wonders who the owner of that place could be to have accumulated such an immense amount of treasure. In the middle of the offerings, he notices a stone tablet that has a mysterious message written on it. The inscription is dedicated to a child who could never see the light of the world and who departed to a faraway place. Wishing happiness to the soul, the message confirms that the stone is actually a grave for a baby. Intrigued, he wonders if all that space was originally created with the intention of raising a child. Moved, he thinks if he should at least recite a prayer in honor of the deceased child, but upon touching his own face, he feels something very soft and becomes completely confused. He wonders why his face has such a strange and fluffy feeling. Looking at his own paws, he panics upon seeing that they are extremely short, and looking down, he notices that his new little body is also chubby and round. He pats his own cheeks without understanding how he ended up in that bizarre form. Looking down, despair sets in as he realizes how incredibly tiny he has become. He refuses to believe that helpless and pathetic little creature is now his new body. After calming down, he accepts that this must be what humans call reincarnation. Since he still does not fully comprehend the rules of this new world, he tries to keep his cool sighing. He decides to focus on what he can do now and begins to look for something useful among the riches. He finds a sacred sword and several magical treasures, finding the previous owner's taste quite peculiar. Seeing a cursed shield that petrifies anyone who looks at it, he finds the effect rather cliché. He examines another curse that causes eternal hunger and labels it as just another boring classic. Spotting a potion that takes away the voice in exchange for legs, he scoffs, thinking that can barely be called a curse. He wonders why there are only cursed items in such a bright place, thinking if they were trying to seal the location with opposing energies. Suddenly, he spots a small gemstone fallen on the floor and is intrigued by the find. He looks up, wondering if that jewel ended up rolling down from some upper part of the treasure. Looking closer at the chest, the little monster notices something surprising inside. He is amazed to come across a true colossal mountain filled with glittering treasures. Very excited about the discovery, he celebrates mentally for hitting the jackpot in that place. The little one notices that the object is not just an ordinary jewel, but rather a spiritual weapon with power of its own. He feels a dark energy coming from the gemstone that reminds him very much of his past life. Given this, the little dragon immediately decides that he needs to get that item no matter what. However, he gets a bit annoyed noticing that the golden decoration of the object is getting in the way. Putting it to the test, he realizes with joy that the jewel begins to come loose when he pulls it with force. Determined, the little monster grabs the precious item with his little paws and begins to pull it. He strains so hard with his chubby little body that he ends up falling on his back, but the stone still does not come out. Unwilling to give up, he continues making a huge effort to try and wrench the object out of there. Suddenly, the jewel snaps loose with all its force, and the momentum ends up throwing the little dragon backward. Even while falling out of control, he absolutely refuses to let go of his precious treasure. The little dragon goes rolling upside down, all the way down the immense mountain of gold coins, stopping on the ground. He cries out in pain and remembers that a silly tumble like this would not even tickle his old body. At least, he breathes a sigh of relief, seeing that the precious jewel remains perfectly intact in his hands. Suddenly, a deafening sound of thunder begins to echo through the entire golden hall. The little dragon is startled upon feeling a crushing and mysterious pressure arising out of nowhere. He notices a distortion in space and feels that an extremely powerful being is coming from the other side. The Prota gets tense, noticing that not even his old version would be capable of defeating that presence. Still, he tries to encourage himself by remembering that he is the proud descendant of the legendary Black Dragon. At that moment, a gigantic and intimidating blue portal opens up completely right in the middle of the hall. A huge, glowing golden paw begins to step through the dimensional rift slowly. Next, an immense, glowing blue eye observes the little intruder in a threatening manner. A colossal and majestic golden dragon steps out of the portal and stares down the little monster with grandeur. The little one notices immediately that the giant creature is trying to intimidate him, using only its aura. With great pride, he refuses to back down and decides he will not bow before that pressure. He tries to let out a powerful roar to match it, but it ends up coming out as just a cute squeak. The immense golden dragon is completely left with no reaction and surprise looking at the tiny one. To make matters worse, the little dragon ends up sneezing in an extremely cute way right in front of the giant. The enormous creature realizes that the intruder is, in fact, just a helpless newborn hatchling. She approaches calmly and comments that the little one seems to be very frightened by her presence. While the tiny one trembles with fear, the gentle voice reassures him that he does not need to have any dread. The golden dragon decides to change her appearance so as not to scare the little hatchling any further. The creature assumes the form of a beautiful blonde woman and asks if that human appearance is better for him. She introduces herself warmly as Christina, leaving the little one surprised that she revealed her name. Christina kneels down affectionately and asks with concern if the little dragon is doing well and if he has eaten yet. He understands the question, but thinks proudly that before, he could go a whole month without needing to feed himself. However, to his embarrassment, his stomach growls very loudly right after, surprising the woman. The little monster turns red with embarrassment and does not understand why his current body is so weak. The hunger noise continues echoing non-stop, making it clear that he is absolutely starving. Christina realizes that the hatchling's need speaks louder and decides that she needs to prepare something right away. She picks up a mysterious bottle under the watchful and curious gaze of the little dragon, with a very friendly smile on her face. She begins to open the mysterious container. She pours a white, creamy liquid that looks extremely delicious and fresh. The little dragon catches the sweet aroma in the air and is immediately intrigued by that smell. Realizing it is fresh milk, he gets so excited that he even drops the precious jewel he was holding, drooling with anticipation. The tiny one swallows hard while staring intently at that wonderful meal. The woman holds the container and is in doubt whether she should hand the drink directly to the little one. She hesitates for a moment, thinking if the little monster will prefer to drink by himself or if he wants help. Noticing the hatchling's hesitation, the woman pretends she is going to take the milk bottle away, thinking he does not want to drink. The little dragon panics, immediately seeing that she is threatening to take the milk away. He leaps quickly toward the container, letting out a sharp squeak to secure his meal. While he drinks desperately, she comments with a gentle smile that the tiny one seemed to be very hungry. He continues drinking hastily and tries to convince himself that it is just ordinary milk. However, he is surprised and amazed to realize how incredibly delicious that drink manages to be. She asks if it tastes good, and he makes cute noises of approval, although he feels a bit embarrassed by his reaction. Very affectionately, the woman asks the little hatchling if he would like to leave with her from then on. She extends her hand in a welcoming way, inviting the little monster in a very loving manner to accompany her. The guardian promises that the world outside is filled with even tastier foods and many fun things for him to discover for the first time. Although he does not understand all her words, he comprehends perfectly that she is inviting him to depart together. He analyzes the situation and notes that she does not seem to be a bad person. Plus, there is nothing else useful for him in that hall. He also accepts that it is too dangerous to try to survive alone with that fragile body and without the protection of an adult. To save his pride, he mentally insists that he is not accepting the invitation just because her milk is wonderful. Having decided, the little dragon walks up to her and gently grabs the hem of his new protector's white dress. Very happy with the hatchling's choice, the woman picks him up gently in her arms and welcomes him with a sweet smile. She embraces him emotionally, revealing that she was afraid he would not be able to be born, and thanks deeply for the fact that he is alive. The little one is confused and surprised to realize that she is thanking just for his existence in that world. He finds that display of affection a bit strange for his old customs, but admits that the feeling is not bad. He deduces that the original soul that was supposed to inhabit that body unfortunately ended up disappearing before birth. To return the affection received, the little monster extends his little paw, holding the magical jewel he had collected. Christina is surprised to see the object and asks if that is a gift of thanks or if he wants her to keep it safe. He rubs his little face against her affectionately, thinking that it would not be good at all to see his new guardian sad or down. She hugs him tight with her eyes sparkling, asking emotionally if the little hatchling is trying to comfort her and praising his cuteness. The woman begins to walk out of the hall with the little one in her arms, asking for them to take very good care of each other. He returns the affection in silence, feeling an enormous gratitude toward her for giving him a new chance to live. Looking back one last time, the little dragon mentally wishes that the soul of the deceased child finds eternal peace. He vows to himself that, in this new life, he will become strong enough so that no one can hurt him or defeat him ever again. With determination shining in his eyes, he decides that he will use every possible resource at his disposal to achieve his goal. Sometime later, the little dragon sleeps peacefully belly up, surrounded by soft sheets and glittering jewels. He begins to open his eyes slowly, waking up calmly from his sleep in a very lazy manner. The tiny one lets out a very long yawn and stretches all over in the middle of his comfortable cushions. 1 month passes since his arrival at the temple, and he decides it is already time to begin his usual morning meditation. In the beginning, he felt very confused by the limitations of his new little body, but gradually he got used to the infant form. He discovers that the new body manages to accumulate magical energy in the heart in a natural way, even without using breathing techniques. Initially, he thought there was something wrong, but upon seeing Christina use her own magic, he realized that this was common there. Thanks to this ease, he does not need to focus on training the middle dantian and can dedicate all his focus to developing the lower dantian. He rejoices upon noticing that he is in a wonderful place where the purest and most concentrated magical energy of all flows. With a newborn body free from any previous impurities, his current situation becomes extremely satisfactory for training. However, he confesses to himself that there is a very annoying detail that leaves him quite unsatisfied in his daily routine, and this big problem that disrupts his secret training routine so much boils down to a single little creature. It is a small and curious glowing spirit that was assigned to watch his every step in the temple. He tries to push the creature away with his little paw and wonders indignantly if that annoying being never sleeps or rests. The little one remembers that Christina was afraid to leave him alone and summoned that watcher spirit before stepping out. Because of the constant surveillance of that glowing little thing, he cannot perform his more intense physical training in secret. Whenever he tries to move stealthily to escape the room and explore the outside area of the temple, the little watcher immediately runs to alert Christina, who soon appears worried, saying that the outside is dangerous. In any case, he comforts himself noting that his internal energy continues to grow in a steady and healthy manner. He feels that he has reached an ideal amount of power to try and perform a very important test that he had been planning. Concentrating all his accumulated mana in the middle of the luxurious hall, the little dragon prepares to try using teleportation magic for now. He decides that it is still too early to attempt any escape until he can deal with the little watcher. The little dragon concludes that he urgently needs to cook up a plan to neutralize the snooping spirit. On top of everything, there is also the great difficulty of pronunciation due to his baby vocal structure. He recognizes reviewingly that this physical limitation will only be fully resolved when his body matures. Seeing the spirit mimicking him in a silly way, he gets extremely embarrassed and tells the creature to stop doing that. Suddenly, he interrupts his thoughts upon feeling a strong and familiar movement of mana in the air. Christina has just returned to the hall and asks with a loving smile if he behaved well during her absence. Upon spotting his protector, the little monster runs excitedly in her direction, remembering that the time for food has finally arrived. She melts, thinking he went to greet her out of pure affection, but he mentally highlights that he is only there because of her milk. Christina suggests giving him a bit of meat, but upon opening the hatchling's little mouth, she realizes his teeth have not come in yet. The little dragon makes gestures indicating that he is perfectly fine like this, leaving the woman impressed with how smart he is. She praises him as the cleverest hatchling she has ever seen, while he proudly thinks that this is obvious for a 1,000-year-old beast. In any case, he is very satisfied to see that his docile hatchling act is working perfectly with her. She picks him up thinking he wants a hug, but the little monster tries to explain that in reality, he just wants her to give him the milk. Despite the misunderstanding, he accepts receiving her pampering, knowing that it is very important to maintain a good relationship with his benefactor. Christina looks at the little one with her beautiful blue eyes shining full of tenderness and maternal affection. She squeezes him affectionately and repeats with all the certainty in the world that he is, without a doubt, the most adorable hatchling in existence. Suddenly, she realizes her own forgetfulness and remembers that she had come right there precisely to feed him. She finally hands him the container, calling the drink his favorite milk, and the little one celebrates for getting what he wanted. While nursing contentedly, he thinks to himself that it is very much worth acting cute if it means getting such wonderful milk. While he enjoys his tasty meal with plenty of satisfaction and tranquility, Christina always sits by his side on the floor and begins to talk cheerfully about how her day went. He confesses that he never liked listening to other people's venting, but she does not even suspect that the little one understands every single word she says. Still, seeing the woman opening her heart and venting to him with such trust allows the little dragon to see her smile with a much lighter, calmer, and more relaxed facial expression than before. Thanks to this daily interaction, he managed to learn the language perfectly and obtained a lot of valuable information about that new world. In a very docile and loving way, she calls the little monster a baby. She asks if he has already drunk it all, and at that moment, the little dragon remembers an important rule of that coexistence. She asks with a begging look for him to do something cute, and he frustratedly realizes that all that hospitality of hers is never free. He hesitates, remembering that he lived a whole millennium as a divine and majestic beast, and now he needs to do tricks for food. Even while complaining mentally, he gives in to the blackmail and strikes an extremely adorable pose to please his protector. He tries to comfort himself, thinking it is just a matter of logic to return the kindness after being so well fed. She melts completely at that cute scene, and the little one sighs in relief, seeing that his benefactor was fully satisfied. He lies on the floor, frustrated. Knowing he cannot act rudely toward the person who saved him and supports him in such a sweet way, Christina pats his head and wishes from the bottom of her heart that he grows up happy and has a truly wonderful life. Whenever he hears her speak with such sincerity and sweetness, he cannot help but recognize the truth in her words. It becomes evident to him that Christina is a person of a genuinely kind and warm soul in every little daily action. Since he had never received so much affection in his previous existence, he feels confused about what would be the best way to give back. This warm situation brings to his mind an old memory of his past life, with an old acquaintance of his original species. The fox friend questioned him in a teasing way about why he insisted on living isolated, focusing only on his future ascension. She insisted on knowing if he really felt happy living in such a lonely way and focused only on duty. Seeing his silence, she called him an idiot for not knowing how to answer, while he merely said that their paths were different. The fox countered, laughing, affirming that it was precisely because of that cold response that she considered him a complete idiot. Next, she stared intently at him and asked if he had ever experienced true happiness even once in his life. She pointed out that he did not even know what the wonderful feeling of being adored or genuinely loved by someone for real felt like. He replied that this was useless for one who would become a celestial dragon, and the friend just sighed, commenting on his coldness. He tried to fight back, saying that she too would soon be a celestial fox, and yet continued to cling to worldly feelings. However, the friend caught him by surprise by revealing with determination that her true goal was to transform into a human. He was completely shocked and without understanding how that choice could make any sense for a powerful creature like her. With her cheeks blushing, she revealed affectionately that she had fallen in love with a man who loved her, even knowing she was a fox. She explained that if her partner loved her that much, it was perfectly natural and fair to want to return all that feeling. The fox expressed with affection the sincere wish that the dragon too could experience and comprehend this beautiful feeling one day. She joked, calling him a silly guy who would not even notice if he found someone special, while he swore that would never happen to him. He warned her that if she became human, she could no longer visit him, but deep down, the dragon just did not want to spoil his friend's happiness. The little dragon recalls that moment with affection and realizes that in his own way, he had grown quite fond of his old companion. He remembers when she looked at him in an extremely sad and tearful way, which left him quite intrigued and without understanding the reason. The friend complained that he should have just been cold as always, while the dragon asked her to stop grumbling and speak properly. She then gave him a little push out of spite, wishing in a very grumpy way that the stubborn dragon would have a good and happy life. Next, she went running away irritated, calling him a slow lesser dragon, leaving her companion quite confused after trying to be kind. But before disappearing on the horizon, she had looked back with a beautiful, sincere smile and thanked him deeply. Back in the present, the hatchling admits he still does not understand everything, but now he comprehends the real meaning of returning the affection received. Christina finally returns to the temple hall and asks in a very docile way if her beloved baby waited patiently for her. But upon entering the room, she gives a start of pure surprise and amazement coming across the scene in front of her. The little dragon decided to stand on two paws to show his rapid physical growth as a form of thanks. He hopes that, by proving his rapid development, his protector will finally decide to dismiss the annoying watcher spirit. However, to his surprise, Christina begins to cry with emotion at the scene, leaving the tiny one completely confused and awkward. Without losing time, the woman throws herself emotionally in the hatchling's direction to grab him with all the love in the world. She squeezes him in a warm embrace and exclaims that she does not know what to do with so much cuteness, while he realizes she was not sad. Releasing him from the tight hug, she remembers very excitedly that she had brought a special gift from her trip to hand to him. The little hatchling immediately gets curious at the mention of a gift and soon begins to wonder if it will be some more delicious food. She explains with a docile smile that it is something very easy to eat, even for one who does not have strong and fully developed teeth. Yet, the woman pulls a huge white egg out of her bag and reveals excitedly that it is one of the legendary delicacies of a phoenix. She confirms with joy that she managed to obtain some rare eggs of that creature to feed her beloved companion. The giant egg begins to emit a very warm, reddish glow, revealing a strong presence of fire mana in its interior. The little dragon remembers that the phoenix is an immortal bird that rises from the ashes and finds that description similar to another creature from his past life. However, he recalls an important detail. That legendary bird from his old world did not hatch from an egg like that one. Leaving doubts aside to focus on food, he leaps with determination and dives his head directly inside Christina's bag. He begins to rummage with his little paws inside the travel bag to manage to pull the food out of there. With a lot of knack, the little dragon manages to hug one of the giant eggs tightly and pulls it out of the bag with care, making cute noises and applying a bit of pressure. He tries to break the sturdy shell to reach the delicious contents. He celebrates mentally upon managing to crack a perfect split at the top of the giant egg's shell. Without losing time, the little monster chomps down on the bright golden yolk directly from the shell with a lot of will and appetite. His eyes even sparkle with so much joy tasting the delicacy and realizing that it has an indescribably wonderful taste. She is very happy to see that the food pleased his palate, explaining that the egg was prepared with the heat of a red dragon's fire. While licking his chops, the little one realizes that, besides the great flavor, the food also carries a subtle amount of fire magical energy. She hands the milk bottle to him to accompany the meal, asking very affectionately for him not to eat in such a hasty way. The protector explains that even though dragon hatchlings have quite sturdy stomachs, it is always good to be careful to avoid indigestion. He continues devouring the warm food of soft texture, which goes down in an extremely smooth way through his throat. Very satisfied and excited with the feast, he extends his chubby little paw to grab the next phoenix egg from the bag. However, upon touching the next egg, he notices with strangeness that that specific one is very red and extremely rigid. Since there are many other easy-to-break options in the bag, he decides to leave that hard shell aside to try and eat it at another moment. After eating in large quantities, the little dragon falls down lying on his back with his tummy completely full, round, and heavy. Christina is amused to see how well he ate and strokes his belly, thinking about bringing even more on the next trip. She gives a gentle rub on the top of his head and asks for the hatchling to rest right there while she goes to fetch more supplies. The little dragon yawns tiredly, surprised at himself for overdoing it so much on the food, and notes that he will need some time to digest it all. The heavy post-meal fatigue begins to hit, and he feels his eyelids getting extremely heavy with each passing second. Unable to resist the relaxing sleep for long, the little monster falls deeply asleep in the middle of his comfortable cushions. Sometime later, his little ears move suddenly upon hearing a very subtle noise coming from near his basket. The hatchling opens his eyes very slowly, waking up from his relaxing sleep in a rather lazy manner. The tiny one props himself up on his front paws and lets out a slight murmur of tiredness while trying to get up from the soft basket. The little dragon tries to orient himself and shake off the laziness after waking up from a long and deep sleep in the basket. Looking around, he notes that he is completely alone in the temple hall and notices something strange nearby. He notices with surprise that the amount of eggs increased, concluding that Christina passed by there while he slept. Since he has already digested his previous meal, he wonders if he should not eat one more of those tasty eggs. The little dragon comes to the quick conclusion that eating just one more delicious egg would do no harm to his body. To ease his conscience, he pretends it is not gluttony, but rather an important way to absorb fire magical energy. With determination, he climbs on top of that red and hard egg that he had left aside in the past meal. The little monster observes the mysterious phoenix egg from very close, with a lot of attention and curiosity. He studies the object for a few moments and concludes that that weird phoenix egg houses something very special. Knowing he would have to face it at some point, the dragon decides to take advantage of being alone to act without interruptions. The Proto takes a deep breath and begins to concentrate a powerful amount of dark energy in his small little paw. He channels all his accumulated mana into that single point to deliver a strike capable of breaching the sturdy shell. Next, he delivers an extremely potent punch loaded with dark energy directly against the red egg. The violent impact of the attack generates a strong shockwave and dust around the phoenix object. However, the little dragon is completely left with no reaction, seeing the result of his attack with all his strength. To his total amazement, the red shell of the mysterious egg did not suffer even a single small scratch or crack. Frustrated with the total ineffectiveness of the strike, the little dragon steps back a few paces to plan his next move. While rubbing his sore little paw, he realizes with clarity that that task will be no easy feat to accomplish. Even without wanting to exert himself so much for a simple baked egg, he decides to use his maximum power just this once. The little monster begins to float in the air, concentrating a massive and intimidating amount of magical energy. Summoning all his strength from the past, the spirit of his original form arises behind him while he prepares to attack. He fires a gigantic and devastating beam of concentrated energy directly against the shell of the red egg. Completely spent by the extreme effort, he falls exhausted on the floor and wonders if he finally got what he wanted. The little dragon celebrates proudly, noticing cracks forming in the shell. Confirming to himself how strong he is, anxious for the prize, he extends his little paw to take a bite and taste the delicacy that cost him so much work to open. However, the little dragon gets a big scare, noticing a totally strange movement coming from inside the broken shell. He steps back, startled, immediately noticing that the shell is breaking apart in a way he had not originally planned. His expression turns confused, hearing an extremely docile and tiny chirp echoing from inside the phoenix egg. To his total amazement, a very chubby-cheeked and docile white little bird comes out of there and stares at him with a lot of curiosity. The little dragon is completely left with no reaction, coming across the live avian hatchling looking directly into his eyes. The small bird lets out a very joyful and friendly chirp in the dragon's direction, totally ignoring his confusion. He tries to understand the reason for there being a live bird inside there, since he was certain that the egg was truly baked. In addition to the mystery, he begins to feel an extremely familiar vibration of magical energy coming from the little bird's small body. The little monster widens his eyes in dread upon realizing an unbelievable detail about that small being's magical aura. He realizes in shock that the little bird's energy is a mixture of fire power with his own magical strength that he used in the attack. He comprehends that the egg did not resist his attack, but rather absorbed all the colossal power he fired to hatch it. The little dragon falls dramatically to the floor upon realizing that all the energy he had accumulated served to hatch the little bird. He deeply laments his great loss of power, remembering the enormous sacrifice it took to gather that precious mana. The small bird continues chirping joyfully by his side, leaving the little dragon even more annoyed for not understanding what it wants to say. The phoenix hatchling begins to rub itself affectionately against the dragon's face, totally ignoring its companion's anger. He does not understand the reason for so much sudden friendliness and begins to question if all the phoenixes in the world act in such a docile manner. Suddenly, he remembers a very common biological detail among newborn birds and widens his eyes, deducing what happened. He realizes that that docile behavior is a case of imprinting, where the hatchling views the first being it sees as its mother. The dragon remembers he has already seen creatures act like this in the past, and resolves to do a quick test to confirm his big suspicion. He begins to walk hastily from one side to the other, and notes that the little bird follows him, mimicking perfectly his eye. Every step he tries to run in circles around the room to lose it, but the small bird continues chasing him with total focus and determination. Faced with the result, the little dragon stops tired and confirms that the little bird truly views him as its sole protector and guide. Exhausted in every possible way, he resolves to take a leap and climb onto a high-low wall to manage to wrest away from the hatchling. The little bird begins to chirp desperately down from below, and the little dragon notices relieved that it has not learned to fly yet. Feeling very lazy, he decides that the best option for now is just to ignore the noisy bird and take a good nap. The little dragon notes satisfied that the little bird's chirping is getting weaker and weaker and without strength down below. However, he hears a very faint crying sound and realizes that something is wrong with the avian hatchling. Looking down, he enters complete despair, seeing that the little bird has started to cry for real. Although he is upset with the loss of energy he suffered, the little monster cannot ignore the little creature's sadness. Meanwhile, Christina comes running back to the temple, deeply regretting having taken much longer than she expected. She carries a basket filled with new warm eggs, very worried about the possibility of her baby being hungry. In a hurry, she opens the large doors of the room, hoping to find the little dragon well and safe. Seeing the empty shells scattered on the floor, she deduces that he ate everything that was left and ended up falling asleep. The woman approaches her sleeping basket slowly and lets out an exclamation of pure surprise looking closely. She notices a small, fluffy tail that definitely does not belong to a dragon coming out from the middle of the blankets. Christina smiles all over seeing the dragon hatchling, sleeping cuddled up with the small bird in a very adorable way. The Guardian begins to think about the real possibility of the rare egg she had brought having been, in fact, that of a phoenix. The small bird begins to wake up and lets out a very docile chirp, noticing Christina's presence nearby. The little dragon also awakens from his sleep and turns lazily to look at his protector. The woman observes the two hatchlings from very close, showing a rather thoughtful and serious expression on her face. Suddenly, the small bird begins to release intense blazes of fire around the sleeping basket. In a protective manner, Christina realizes that the bird possesses pure fire magic mixed with darkness and is impressed by a newborn being so strong. She recognizes that it is the sacred bird of fire, which possesses the legendary ability to travel back and forth to the Garden of the Gods. The Guardian reflects on the irony of fate seeing a legendary creature like this, protecting the last existing divine black dragon. She gets a bit worried seeing that the bird does not let her get close, knowing it would not be right to use force against a baby. The phoenix hatchling positions itself in front of the little dragon in an aggressive manner, chirping angrily to keep the woman away. The little dragon holds the startled little bird and warns it not to be reckless, since that woman is his beloved savior. Next, he tries to ask Christina where that mysterious bird came from and why it hatched from a baked egg. She explains that there is only a single phoenix per generation, and that small hatchling is the new sacred guardian of this era. The woman reveals that a new phoenix always hatches within 100 years after the mysterious passing of the previous generation. The little dragon finds that explanation very strange because he is certain that the phoenix of this current era should still be very much alive. She wonders if some anomaly occurred in the world and finds it curious to see a phoenix protecting the darkness since birth. Realizing the gravity of the current situation, she decides she cannot ignore that big event and calls for the spirit Rai. The Guardian resolves that she needs to consult with Elder Phaseus of the Red Dragons to discuss the bird's birth. She thanks the spirit Rai, who guarantees in a very joyful way that he will take perfect care of everything during her absence. The woman asks if the little dragon can wait safely in the temple, and he replies promptly that yes, with a cute nod. Internally, the little monster celebrates excitedly, realizing that her departure means he will finally have plenty of free time. Although she feels dread in leaving the hatchlings alone, she feels deep in her heart that the little dragon will handle it all. The Guardian reflects that he is not just smart, but seems to carry a wisdom and well-defined values of his own of an adult. She is also impressed with his capacity to control mana, since ordinary hatchlings usually use magic in a very disastrous way. She notes that he is different from everyone and manages to manipulate his magical energy in an extremely complex, precise, and conscious manner. The woman concludes that he is definitely no ordinary prodigy and recalls an old conversation she had with her former master. She remembers having asked the master if he had done something to the hatchling before handing him over, definitely to her care. Shaking off those thoughts, with determination, she decides that it does not matter what the big secret behind that docile hatchling is. The Guardian smiles with tenderness, reaffirming that now she is his master, and promises to return to the temple as fast as she can. Suddenly, she remembers one more quite important detail that she had discovered before departing for the trip. The woman comments that she heard it said that the hatchling of Elder Phaseus is also considered an extremely talented prodigy. She suggests that that young red dragon could become an excellent companion and help him a lot in his future. With a gentle smile, she says she imagines that the two prodigy hatchlings could become great and inseparable friends one day. She asks for the spirit Rai to alert her immediately through telepathy should any type of unforeseen event occur in the temple. She asks affectionately for the little dragon not to wander away from the spirit of light, and the little monster pretends to agree in a cute way. However, he gets quite bored realizing that she continues giving recommendations without actually leaving from there for good. She begins to squeeze the little dragon's soft cheeks with a lot of affection, leaving the little hatchling confused by that reaction. Unable to resist so much cuteness, she gives an extremely loving kiss on the chubby cheek of her beloved baby dragon. The small bird chirps asking for affection too, and she smiles saying goodbye to the two hatchlings with the promise to return very fast. Christina finally leans and closes the large and luxurious wooden doors of the sleeping room. The little dragon twitches his little ears, hearing the subtle sound of the latch locking from the outside, much relieved by the sudden silence. He wonders if his protector has finally gone away from there. The little monster clenches his small, chubby fists with a lot of enthusiasm, noticing that the long-awaited moment has arrived. He celebrates with his arms up with so much joy, celebrating mentally his sweet and awaited freedom. The little dragon gets up determined from the crib, thinking it would be impossible for him to stay locked up there like an ordinary baby. Upon jumping onto the soft floor, he remembers frustrated that routine filled with rigid rules did not let him train his power in peace. He begins to walk and concludes that no one in the temple will care if he explores the outside of the room a little bit. However, the small bird begins to follow him hastily through the room, chirping in a docile and joyful way. The little dragon gets a bit uncomfortable seeing the small bird looking at him with those begging and pleading little eyes. Without much patience, the little dragon bites the docile bird with care to lift it from the cold floor. He tosses the avian hatchling gently upward so that it falls perfectly on top of his head. He decides that it is much better to carry it on his head than to have the bird tripping and disrupting his walk through the hall. The little dragon continues his firm walk with the small bird balanced in a very cute way on the top of his head. Upon arriving in front of a large closed door, he calculates that he can reach the glittering handle if he gives a good leap. The little monster crouches with determination and prepares to give a big leap with all the physical strength he possesses. He takes a lot of momentum and leaps with precision in the direction of the golden metal latch of the huge room door. He manages to grab and hold on firmly to the glittering handle, trying to turn it with the weight of his body. To his disappointment, he realizes with clarity that the door is completely locked from the outside by his protector. The little dragon looks back and realizes that the spirit of light was calm precisely because he knew that the door was locked. He gives a mischievous smile, remembering that he is no ordinary hatchling and that silly locks of wood will not manage to stop him. The little monster begins to channel his dark magical energy directly into the keyhole of the door. With a very satisfying click, the large wooden door finally unlocks and opens wide before him. Now, his biggest and main concern is how the small watcher spirit of light will react, seeing that he opened the door. He observes the small being of glittering wings with a lot of attention, wondering if it will fly fast to alert Christina. However, to his complete surprise, he notices a totally different and unexpected reaction coming from the spirit of light. The small glowing being nods its head agreeing in a docile way, indicating that it approves of the exit and giving permission for him to pass. Even without understanding the reason for so much sudden friendliness from that watcher, the dragon decides not to question and just accept his good luck. With the path finally clear, the little dragon takes his first decided steps toward the outer corridor of the sanctuary. His eyes even sparkle with curiosity upon finally managing to put his paws outside that closed and monotonous room. He is extremely impressed, seeing that the corridors of the large temple are infinitely larger than he imagined. He finally comprehends the reason for Christina and the spirit of light, not caring so much about his escape attempts from the room. They knew it would be impossible for a slow, hatchling like him to manage to go very far, walking on foot through that huge temple. He realizes that his stride is too short and concludes that exploring on foot without using teleportation spells would be a great waste of time. But the little monster flashes a mischievous smile, remembering that he had already prepared in advance for that exact situation. The little dragon begins to concentrate a large amount of bright, blue magical energy around his entire small body. He recalls perfectly how Christina's energy flowed whenever she utilized teleportation magic in front of him. He feels the mana around respond to his commands in a natural way, managing to mentally map out the entire large sanctuary all at once. Confident in his great control skills, he prepares to perform the spell and begins to choose the best destination to go to. He looks askance at the spirit of light and thinks triumphantly that, even if the Watcher wants to snitch on him to Christina now, it will be too late. He smiles victoriously, thinking that the small spirit of light is way too late, and lets out the activation command of his magic. A gigantic and bright blue teleportation magic circle arises around the dragon and activates instantaneously. In the blink of an eye, the group is teleported outside the temple, emerging on the top of a very beautiful verdant mountain in the open air. The little dragon is totally amazed, contemplating the immensity of nature and the beauty of the world on the outside for the first time. He begins to realize that new world is completely different and infinitely more beautiful than the world of his old life. Suddenly, he becomes aware of a desperate detail and realizes that he is plunging in free fall through the air in the middle of the mountain. Since he chose to emerge high up to avoid getting stuck in the walls, the little bird tries to help him, flapping its tiny wings in vain. The two end up falling directly against the grass of the ground, generating a small impact of dust and dirt in the middle of the beautiful green meadow. He grumbles with his face in the dirt for being too low to open his wings, but relieves himself noting that he brought his companions safely. Looking to the side, he sees the small spirit of light spinning in a totally dizzy and startled way after the intense magical trip. He thinks that Christina made teleportation look very easy and wonders if what he did is really something that impressive after all. But suddenly he stops and begins to reflect that if any ordinary dragon hatchling managed to use teleportation magic right off the bat, he realizes that Christina would never have left just a single spirit of light taking care of him, had she known he was capable of doing that. Faced with this revelation, the hatchling begins to worry for real and wonders if there is still some way to fix that big mess. He continues finding everyone's shock strange. Since Christina made everything look extremely simple during their daily routine, he catches himself thinking about the matter again and begins to notice the danger of a mere hatchling managing to use a magic of such an advanced level. If she knew about this, she certainly would have reinforced the security much more, instead of leaving just a small fairy as a watcher at the location. He tries to calm down and wonders in silence if the situation is still under his control in some plausible way. The little dragon swallows hard upon realizing the gravity of what he just did and lets out a rather worried murmur. He realizes that he made a silly mistake and laments for having used his magic at a moment when he could no longer hide his powers. The little bird chirps, asking what went wrong and why he is so quiet, while the little dragon decides to stop overthinking it. The little dragon places his little paw on the bird's head to calm it down, deciding that the best thing to do now is to act in a practical way. He begins to run joyfully through the forest, focused on first discovering exactly in which location of the map they ended up. The two hatchlings have a lot of fun observing curious a trail of ants that passes walking slowly along the lawn. Next, the little dragon goes to swim in a very clean river, surrounded by several blue fish curious about the creature's presence. He crosses with a lot of care a natural bridge made of a fallen tree trunk filled with moss that connects the two banks. With a lot of effort, the little one manages to climb up a large tree to try to have a wider view of the entire forest around. He finally reaches the top of the leaves and lets out a joyful shout, managing to poke his head out of the tree canopy. The little bird also emerges right behind, coming out from the middle of the green leaves, and chirps very loudly to celebrate that they reached up there. Observing the horizon from the top of the tree, the hatchling locates a mountain in the distance, and concludes that that location must be Christina's lair. He observes an enormous bright barrier that covers the entire mountain, revealing the exact location of his temporary dwelling. The little dragon is fascinated, seeing for the first time what the imposing lair of a dragon looks like when viewed from the outside. He notes the absurd amount of mana that surrounds that entire region, making the sanctuary look totally fused with nature. Satisfied with what he discovered, the hatchling decides he has already seen enough from up there and prepares to climb back down to the ground. He begins to slide down the branches laughing and thinks to himself that it is already time to begin planning his return to the nursery. The small watcher spirit flies nearby while thinking that, despite the accidental teleportation, the hatchling at least did not lower his guard. The little dragon continues climbing down the tree and begins to plan how he is going to display his incredible talent for teleportation magic. He imagines that, upon showing also his wisdom in restraining himself, Christina certainly will shower him with praises for his great talent. He gets excited thinking she could help him promote himself even further and reward him with many delicious things. The little dragon focuses on not overdoing his actions so as not to leave the blonde suspicious of his real origins and past memories. He walks confident back through the woods, hoping that his entire return plan and hatchling lie goes perfectly well. Suddenly, the hatchling stops and sniffs the air after sensing a mysterious and extremely alluring aroma coming from the middle of the plants. He begins to follow the curious scent, circling around the lawn, while the small watcher spirit observes him without understanding anything. With his eyes sparkling with so much emotion, the little dragon runs toward the source of that wonderful aroma that attracted him so much. He pushes aside the green bushes with his little paws and celebrates a lot, finding a very special plant hidden in the woods. He is shocked seeing that it is an extremely rare wild ginseng, a true celestial seed filled with energy. He is impressed with the quality of the plant and thinks he would expect nothing less from something that grows on a sacred mountain like that one. The hatchling begins to salivate a lot, just looking at the ginseng, thinking that that would be perfect to restore his strengths. He brings his small little paw close to the plant with a lot of determination, seriously pondering the idea of devouring it right there in the forest. Suddenly, the watcher spirit steps in front of him with arms crossed to stop him, leaving the little dragon totally surprised. The small spirit begins to fly rapidly around the wild ginseng to protect the plant and avoid it being eaten. The dragon hatchling stares at the spirit of light with a very irritated look for having had his delicious meal interrupted in that manner. The spirit continues flying right in his face to disrupt him, and the little dragon complains mentally about how annoying that creature is. Seeing his master's situation, the small bird makes an extremely serious and determined expression to intervene in the fight. The cute bird flies like a projectile and hits the watcher spirit dead on, leaving the little dragon very joyful and excited with the attack. Taking advantage of the perfect distraction caused by his winged companion, the hatchling advances rapidly to grab the valuable ginseng, He stuffs the entire plant into his mouth all at once and, even finding it too big to swallow, exerts himself to the maximum to eat it all very fast. The little dragon bites the wild ginseng with all his strength, trying to chew and swallow that huge root all in one go. He thinks that, since the root is already in his mouth, the situation is completely under his control and nothing else can go wrong. But suddenly the root of the ginseng begins to break apart and crack in a very strange way before he manages to swallow. The ginseng lets out a frightening and shrill scream, leaving the dragon hatchling totally in shock and with no reaction at that bizarre sound. The little dragon trembles with fright while listening to that deafening noise, asking himself what is happening to the plant. The little bird and the spirit of light get startled, hearing the little dragon choke and cough violently, trying to spit that out. The little bird enters total panic and chirps desperate, while the little dragon groans in pain, feeling very sick. All of a sudden, he realizes that that plant was not the celestial ginseng he imagined, and feels that, if it continues like this, he will end up passing out from pain, with his vision darkening. The hatchling deeply laments for having brought his small companions outside the safe lair in that situation. He ends up falling unconscious on the forest floor, while a bright green energy begins to surround him in a mysterious manner. At that moment, someone wearing leather boots walks slowly through the woods and approaches the location where the hatchlings are fallen. The green magic surrounds the root of the fallen ginseng and levitates it with care, keeping the small dragon unconscious on the floor right beside the little bird and the light watcher observe, startled the root floating in the air, without understanding who is responsible for that levitation magic. A mysterious person of green hair and wearing a brown hood appears controlling the mana that floats around the hatchlings in the forest. With a wave of the hand, the hooded person also levitates the small unconscious dragon, leaving the little bird even more startled at the scene. The stranger approaches in silence and reaches into their garments to grab an item that can help resolve the little creature's situation. A small, golden and bright pill begins to float in the air, emanating a very pure and comforting healing energy. The healing pill is directed slowly to the mouth of the small unconscious dragon to reverse the harmful effects of that root. The stranger places the pill directly into the hatchling's mouth, who swallows it immediately while still unconscious. Surrounded by a very gentle green magical aura, the little dragon begins to calm down and to recover his strengths, little by little. Opening his eyes slowly, the little dragon is surprised by the feeling of relief and wonders what exactly just happened. Still half weak, the hatchling lets out a low murmur and tries to focus his vision on the hooded figure of green hair that is in front of him. The mysterious person begins to walk away in silence, and the little dragon feels his strengths and consciousness fade again before blacking out. The hatchling falls into deep sleep once more on the grass floor, while the last remnants of the green magic disappear from the air. The little bird cries, desperate, seeing the little dragon motionless, and chirps, asking for help from the watcher spirit, who tries to calm it, asking for a moment. The little bird nests sad beside its protector, who just needs to rest a bit to fully recover from that scare. Meanwhile, in another place very far from there, the beautiful Christina walks peacefully with a slight smile on her face through the Imperial Hall. She arrives at her destination and greets someone in a polite way, commenting that it had already been a long time since their last meeting. The imposing red dragon Phaseus is resting on his golden throne, surrounded by flames when Christina calls him by his proper name. The imposing red dragon agrees with her in a grand manner, affirming that it truly has already been a long time since they saw each other. Phaseus wonders what would bring the leader of the golden dragons right there to make a visit so sudden and without any prior warning. He assumes his human form and smiles, thinking that she must already know whether he will accept or not the proposal that she came to bring him. Phaseus, in his form of a man of red hair, extends his hand and says he hopes her matter is truly worthy of his attention. Christina bows with elegance and asks for forgiveness for the breach of protocol, but the redhead reassures her, praising her good manners. Christina reveals directly the reason for her coming, announcing that a new black dragon hatchling has finally just been born into the world. Phaseus rises from his throne in complete shock while listening from the blonde that she has not yet reported this big news to the Supreme Lord. Still unable to believe what he just heard, the red dragon asks, confused, why she decided to go speak first with him. She explains with a rather worried look that the small little creature is still very young and fragile to deal with the dangers of the world. She argues that the little hatchling needs plenty of time to grow in peace and gain all the necessary types of life experiences. She wishes that the little black dragon can develop freely at his own pace and find his own identity in the future. She asks for Phaseus to be a source of support for the baby and, above all, stop the terrible Lord Issa from trying to interfere in his upbringing. Phaseus stares at her with seriousness and asks if that small black dragon hatchling is really worth all this effort and gigantic risk. Christina asks if he has an inkling of the power that the baby carries. Revealing that the small hatchling was capable of reviving a legendary phoenix, Facius is shocked because the phoenix of this era was still supposed to be alive, which makes the little black dragon's feat something even more incredible. He punches the arm of the throne, worried, knowing that, if the Lord discovers this, he will brainwash the baby to use him as a weapon. He knows that the Lord would eliminate the hatchling without hesitating should he see him as a threat, while lamenting the careless attitudes of other dragons. He smiles and praises her cleverness, saying that she came right here knowing very well that he would not be able to refuse a proposal like that. Christina smiles with tranquility and replies that she merely trusted that the old friend would make the wisest and most correct decision for them all. He reflects that it would be very advantageous to forge bonds between the heir of the dark lineage and his own son, who will also be a future elder. He promises to send his son soon to help in the little dragon's education, and Christina thanks immensely for Elder Facius's support. Facius smiles from the corner of his mouth and agrees that that was an excellent conversation. While Christina warns that she is already going to withdraw first walking back, she thinks in a disdainful way about that arrogant lord and can already imagine perfectly his face of frustration. She opens her beautiful golden wings to fly and smiles, thinking about the moment when the Lord realizes that things will not turn out how he wants. However, she reflects in silence that Facius himself is not much different and that he too will have some unpleasant surprises. She begins to think about Facius's sole heir, the young red dragon named Prediction. Knowing that the youth was at odds with his father, she believes that this planned meeting will also do a lot of good for Prediction himself. Christina walks hastily back through the lawn and thinks that she needs to return as soon as possible to take care of her beloved hatchling. In a super cute version, she worries thinking if the baby is not crying from hunger and decides she should at least take something tasty to him. Suddenly, she senses a very strange warning signal and stops immediately, with her eyes widened in pure shock and surprise. Sensing the transmission of energy, she realizes that the signal comes from Rai and enters panic, praying for it not to be what she is imagining. She begins to release her mana and transforms partially, desperate upon realizing that it is a grave emergency with the hatchlings. With an extremely fast and violent impulse, she leaps from the ground to fly in the direction of the distress signal. Christina flies at full speed, enveloped in a powerful blue magical aura, cutting through the skies toward the exact point of the call. She finally arrives at the forest and shouts, desperate for the little ones, upon spotting the dragon hatchling lying motionless in the middle of the lawn. She lands quickly, noticing that the small bird is covering the little dragon, and listens to the weak heartbeat of the little one lying there. Holding the hatchling with a lot of affection, she asks, startled how they ended up outside the room and what happened for him to be so weak. The spirit of light begins to float around the broken root on the ground to show Christina the origin of all that grave problem. Upon recognizing the plant, she is horrified and asks in shock if the little one really swallowed a whole mandrake without thinking twice. She remembers that the mandrake is already dangerous on its own, and that the plants from there are even more potent for being saturated with dragon mana. She touches his little face, unable to believe that a baby of just 1 month managed to find and eat a mandrake that had been growing for hundreds of years. Upon approaching and sniffing the hatchling up close, she senses a familiar aroma in the air and finally comprehends what happened during her absence. She recognizes the scent of Riz, the most talented youth of the Red Dragons, and worries about her now knowing of the little black dragon's existence. However, since the baby survived thanks to the youth's help, she decides she must consider that incident as a true divine blessing. She hugs the hatchling in a loving way and assumes the blame for the mistake, admitting that she thought just the spirit Rai would suffice to keep him safe. She finds it unbelievable that a baby has tried and managed to use teleportation, and finds it ironic that the first thing he did was eat poison. Hearing that familiar voice calling him affectionately a troublemaker, the little dragon begins to open his eyes slowly in the comfort of the embrace. He gets startled seeing her face right in front of him and hears the blonde ask with a lot of sweetness if he is already feeling a bit better. She asks for forgiveness, crying for not having been more careful, hugging him tight while the hatchling lets out a whiny cry to comfort her. The hatchling feels half awkward with all that exaggerated drama from the blonde, while she continues saying how much she cares and worries about him. Feeling her heartbeat and seeing her sincere tears, the little dragon apologizes mentally for having acted in such a selfish way. He focuses his gaze on those beautiful blue eyes filled with tears of relief and realizes how much his guardian truly loves him and wants his well-being. She warns that it is better for them to go back home soon, as his little body suffered many damages with the uncontrolled energy of that root. Already back in his warm crib, the little dragon lies in silence while a gentle pink energy begins to circulate through his body. He He assesses that he suffered grave internal injuries and was left with his energy a mess, but comforts himself knowing that the important thing is that he survived that. He finally accepts that, no matter how familiar the scent or the appearance of the plant seems, this is in fact a totally different and new world. He decides that he will need to be much more cautious in the future, but celebrates noticing that all his secret training was worth it in the end. Leaving reflections for later, he focuses on beginning to absorb all that enormous amount of energy that is now circulating in his body. While the little dragon meditates, the small bird that is lying right by his side begins to emit some quite strange electrical noises. The dragon hatchling interrupts his training and looks curious at the bird, wondering to himself what is going wrong with his small companion. The phoenix begins to glow intensely in a bright golden yellow light, leaving the little dragon laughing and very surprised at that sudden transformation. The little dragon claps lightly and observes the bird, remembering that the poor thing did not stop crying and that finally something incredible happened to it. He gently strokes the phoenix's little head to comfort it and tells it not to cry anymore, as it was just a simple stomachache that passed. He is moved seeing everyone's sincere affection and reflects that in his past life, he would never have realized how precious having someone who cares is. The little dragon lets out a slight smile and admits to himself that, in any case, having that type of warm care is not a bad feeling. Suddenly, he notices a different glow arising right before him and focuses his attentive gaze to try and decipher the origin of that new light. The small phoenix bird nests affectionately against his chest while continuing to glow in a magical way and letting out some soft sounds. The dragon hatchling swallows hard upon feeling a vibration of mysterious energy invade his chest. Through that so intimate contact, he gets extremely surprised noticing that a powerful purifying energy begins to flow directly into his own body. Feeling his vital strength restore at an incredible speed, he tries to understand how that small miracle is happening there out of thin air. The little dragon is wide-eyed, confirming that that pure energy is clearing all toxins and healing his internal wounds. The hatchling licks the remnants of the healing pill's juice on his little paw and swallows it all with a lot of relish. He closes his eyes, focused, sensing that energy concentrate on his forehead, having absolute certainty of his suspicions. The little dragon realizes that the water acted as an antidote for the poison, and that, besides that, a powerful fire energy entered his core. He looks surprised at the small bird that is chirping softly by his side, impressed with the bird's utility. The little dragon begins to give several affectionate little pats on the cute bird's head, admitting that it is much more useful than he imagined. Christina opens the door and steps into the room with a gentle smile, asking with affection if the baby managed to rest and sleep well. He replies with a small, whiny sound, and the blonde comments relieved that, despite the big scare they went through, he seems to be doing great now. She picks him up with care in her arms and explains that the root only did him harm because of him being very much a baby. For when he grows, the mandrake will be nothing. The hatchling nests all affectionate against her chest and lets out small squeaks as if saying that he will be fine, right after the scare. Moved with the little one's affection, she smiles in a very sweet way and murmurs words of pure affection for her beloved dragon hatchling. She reflects in silence that, even listening to Rai's report, she still finds it very difficult to believe that a baby managed to use spatial magic. In addition, she is impressed by the fact that he has already recovered from the internal injuries, something unprecedented even with Riz's medical help. She knows that the baby is too exceptional to be ordinary and deeply fears what would happen if the dangerous Lord Issa discovered this. Worried about the little one's future, she lifts him in the air with her hands and stares at him with an extremely serious and reflective look. Seeing her intense and worried expression, the little dragon gets a bit nervous and wonders the reason for so much seriousness out of nowhere. He worries, thinking she might be suspicious of his intelligence and plans to use the phoenix's birth as an excuse if needed. Suddenly, she calls him in a very loving and solemn way, calling him her beloved son to initiate an important conversation. She holds with a lot of gentleness the little paw of the dragon and announces with determination that she made an important decision for his future. With a serious look, filled with love, she reveals that she decided to perform the powerful and ancient inheritance magic directly on his little body. The hatchling tilts his little head confused and wonders in silence what on earth this so-called inheritance magic she is talking about means. This ancient inheritance magic is a legendary technique said to have been granted by the gods themselves to the intelligent creatures of the entire world. It works by implanting the dragon's own source of knowledge, allowing the receiver to inherit techniques, wisdom, and even awaken new gifts. Although the gain of power depends on the receiver's mental maturity, this ritual usually places an absurd physical load on a baby's body. However, the scariest side of all this is that distorted and dangerous ideologies of the caster can also be passed down to the receiver. She explains that that is why few dare to use this so complex magic. Besides the conditions required for the ritual being super rigid, she reveals that this magic can only be performed a single time in life, and looking into his eyes, asks with affection if he trusts her. She honest warnings that the process of knowledge transfer is extremely painful and dangerous, despite its immense power. In addition, she explains that the little one will need to entirely surrender control and trust his mind and body completely to her care. She hesitates for a moment and confesses with a rather sad and melancholy tone of voice that that situation was not what she wished for. She recalls how she just wanted him to be able to have fun drinking his milk and playing free from any adult concerns. Her greatest sincere wish as a guardian was simply to see him enjoy an ordinary, joyful, peaceful childhood and without big burdens to carry. She knows very well that there are certain precious moments and discoveries that can only be truly experienced during the beginning of life. The little dragon remains in silence, listening to the words filled with affection from his guardian, deeply touched by what she is saying. Having the memories of his past life, he comprehends perfectly how warm, generous, and attentive Christina's concern for him is. He knows very well that life can end up being infinitely crueler and more relentless than any ordinary person would be capable of imagining. Beautiful things like childhood innocence and good memories are easily destroyed before the cold reality and obligations of survival. And at the moment when you finally become aware of the value of those things, your own body and mind are already worn out and broken by time. Despite her wanting to protect him more than anything, she had to make this difficult decision just to guarantee that he manages to survive in the future. Thinking about this, he decides that the least he can do to return all this affection is endure a bit of pain and lets out a squeak of acceptance. A few days pass, and Christina takes the hatchling in her arms to the center of a gigantic and imposing golden magic circle on the temple floor. She walks determined in the middle of that immense storm of bright energy that begins to rise around the entire sacred hall. With each step she takes toward the center of the altar, the golden runic symbols on the floor begin to glow with even more magical intensity. The hatchling widens his eyes upon feeling the crushing pressure of that magic and realizes immediately that the process will be extremely challenging. Even being nestled in her arms, he feels the chill on his skin, provoked by the absurd and overwhelming intensity of all that mana. Christina looks at him with a comforting smile and asks in a whisper for the little one not to get nervous and trust fully in the ritual. She closes her eyes slowly and takes a deep breath, concentrating all her vast spiritual energy to give start to the legendary inheritance ritual. She extends her arms forward and evokes her powerful sacred name of Christina El Arcadia to channel the flow of that great ancient magic. The little dragon observes, fascinated. Her words float in the air like beams of light that carry all her own life essence and memory. With eyes wide open and filled with power, she declares with solemnity that she will deliver and inherit all her divine wisdom directly to that hatchling. In the same instant, the little dragon's eyes begin to glow intensely in golden tones, while the runes of the ritual etch themselves into his pupils. The little dragon prepares himself with determination upon feeling that the flow of the powerful magic finally began to reach his body. A huge amount of mana begins to surround his little paws, and, unable to contain the pressure, he lets out a groan of pain. He feels as if an infinite archive of information were being dumped into his mind, forcing his limits to process it all. Despite the extreme pain, the hatchling insists on holding strong, knowing that all that vast knowledge and power soon will belong to him. In one of his moments of pure overcoming, he claims mentally to receive the entire inheritance all at once, releasing a strong glow in his eyes. The little dragon staggers exhausted on the floor back to normal. While listening to the worried voice of his guardian asking if he is okay, Christina runs desperate in the direction of the hatchling in the center of the hall, fearing that the heavy load of the ritual was too much for his little body. She nestles him in her arms with a lot of anguish and begs for her beloved hatchling to give some sign and manage to wake up soon from that state. She sheds tears of concern until she hears the little dragon cough softly, causing her to look attentive and hopeful at him. The little dragon opens one of his eyes slowly and, seeing her despair, tries to reassure her, calling affectionately by her name. The hatchling notices the young prediction standing nearby and wonders if the youth's icy gaze was just a fleeting impression of hostility. He notes that the youth hid his true emotions in a very fast and subtle way before Christina could notice anything. The little dragon finds that attitude extremely strange. Since the youth would have no real reason to act in such an aggressive manner, he reflects that anyone who saw that look would think the two are declared enemies, even having just met each other. The hatchling thinks the youth is lucky that he is no ordinary baby, but is interrupted by the small bird that lands on his head chirping. The small bird begins to flap its cute wings and lets out a very soft and loving chirp to call the attention of its beloved protector. The bird wags its tail joyfully and continues chirping in a cute way, trying to cheer up the little dragon after all that stress. Suddenly, the phoenix begins to float in the air and emanates a warm and comforting glow right above the head of its beloved companion. The three remain still in the hall while the small phoenix continues chirping joyfully and calling everyone's attention. Prediction observes the cute bird with disdain and grumbles irritated about that feathered little creature being just a noisy nuisance. The hatchling hears the grumble and laughs mentally, while the redhead disguises his embarrassment, clearing his throat and asking what type of different bird that is. Christina smiles proud and confirms the difference, revealing with a lot of enthusiasm to the youth that the small bird is a phoenix hatchling. The young red dragon gets totally surprised at the revelation, since the phoenix of the previous generation should still be alive and well. She admits it is something unprecedented, but explains that, since the bird has not awakened its powers yet, she and Phaseus are just monitoring it for now. The youth turns his gaze away, quiet, and accepts the explanation upon hearing his father's name. Making the hatchling notice how much the boy obeys the leader, Christina gives a pat on Prediction's head and thanks from her heart for him having made such a long trip right there to help them in the temple. She asks for him to be a good older brother to the baby, and the youth blushes slightly while murmuring with shyness that he understood the request. The little dragon is amused, noticing that the youth got disappointed when Christina stopped the patting, thinking that he is still just a child. But even finding amusement in that childish scene of the boy, the little dragon cannot cast aside his previous suspicions about him. He admits to himself that that hostile look from before really bothered him and continues pounding in his thoughts frequently. Curious to discover the real intentions of that young red dragon, the hatchling decides that maybe it is a good idea to put him to the test. The hatchling takes a sudden leap in the youth's direction, leaving him completely startled, and without understanding what the baby is trying to do. He extends his cute little paws with the pink pads wide open, preparing to land directly on the young youth's head. The little one lands softly on Prediction's head, with a cute touch, and waits anxious to see what his true reaction to the affection will be. He gives a pat, simulating the attitude of an adult, knowing that any person would react badly to being touched on the head by someone they hate. Focused on analyzing every detail, the hatchling waits for his reaction, while the youth stammers confused without knowing what to do with the baby there. To the little dragon's surprise, the youth gets his face completely red with shame and embarrassment upon receiving that pat on the head. The hatchling finds that reaction very different from what he had imagined, and begins to wonder if the boy after all feels no hatred for him. Convinced that he sensed a hostile intention before, the little dragon decides he needs to perform one more quick test to get the real proof. The young red dragon notices the restless movements of the baby on his head and tries to alert him with a look of surprise and concern. Suddenly, the hatchling throws himself or loses balance from up there, causing the youth to shout, startled without knowing what the little creature is up to. The hatchling throws himself on purpose, feigning a free fall, prepared mentally to hit his face on the marble floor just to see the reaction. Christina watches the scene in complete shock and runs worried in their direction, asking desperate if the two hatchlings are okay. The blonde comments with affection that the baby seems very excited to have gained an older brother, but the little dragon notes something surprising. He realizes with surprise that Prediction acted fast out of pure reflex and held him firmly in his arms to protect him from hitting the ground. Looking very close at the youth, the hatchling feels a bit guilty and thanks mentally for him having managed to hold him in time. Still holding the baby in an awkward way, the young red dragon asks, stammering and quite worried if he got hurt in the fall. Upon noticing that the baby is perfectly fine, the youth turns his gaze away embarrassed and says in a sharp way for him to forget that question. He asks irritated for the hatchling to get off his lap, making the little dragon notice how the boy tries to act in a cold way, even being worried. While moving away, walking slowly, the hatchling concludes that there was no malice at all in the redhead, and that the youth just is terrible at expressing affection. The little dragon wonders if the young youth is the type that has a lot of difficulty being honest with his own feelings. He looks thoughtful at the boy and concludes that, considering the rigid environment in which the redhead was raised, he can completely understand the reason the youth clears his throat bashful, trying to act like a mature adult, while the hatchling observes him with a very amused look, and finding amusement, Prediction approaches curious and comments surprised that the baby dragon truly is tiny, showing a slight fascination with the little creature. Christina emerges smiling in the background and comments that Prediction himself also used to be quite small in the past, though a bit larger than the baby. The youth gets quite confused by the comment and affirms that he cannot imagine himself that size, but the blonde says it is normal for him not to remember. Christina approaches him with a very sweet and nostalgic look, remembering that she rarely had the opportunity to meet him personally in the palace. She displays a beautiful smile from ear to ear and says that, despite the time that passed, she remembers perfectly when he was a baby. She recalls with a lot of affection when he was just a small and adorable little red dragon wrapped in a soft blanket of silk. Upon hearing that so warm revelation, the young prediction is totally left with no reaction and blushes slightly with the memory of his past. The dragon hatchling notes a subtle change in the environment and realizes that a warm and special energy began to arise coming from the young youth. He feels that wave of heat invade the location once more and is impressed to notice that the process of changing feelings is repeating itself. The three remain standing in silence in the large hall while that gentle and pleasant magical energy continues to circulate around them. Suddenly, the little dragon shrinks, all blushed and embarrassed upon realizing that his mana ended up exhausting almost completely again. He gets quite frustrated, noticing that his stomach continues totally empty and hungry, even after having consumed that so strong healing pill. The small bird chirps softly and begins to flap its cute wings by its protector's side, trying to cheer him up in some way at that difficult moment. The small phoenix does a lot of tricks, wagging its tail in the air, and chirps joyfully to wrench at least a small smile from the little dragon. It floats in the air and releases a wave of bright and warm energy, focused on helping its beloved crib companion to recover soon. The three watch that adorable scene with a lot of attention, enchanted by the pure and sincere friendship that formed quickly between the two hatchlings. The redhead tells the hatchling to play properly and warns that he will go out to fetch something tasty to eat, and the little dragon agrees immediately. Christina smiles happy and asks with affection for the two not to do any too rough playing while she is outside the room. The little dragon observes his guardian move away down the corridor and prepares himself for what is to come with the young youth, who stayed there with him. The youth sits on the floor in the most comfortable way possible and calls the hatchling with a rather cold and authoritative tone of voice, breaking the cute mood. Suddenly, Prediction holds the little dragon by the cheeks in a firm way with both hands, leaving the small hatchling completely without understanding anything. He pulls the little dragon's soft cheeks with curiosity to test him, causing the hatchling to wonder what that cheeky redhead kid wants. The young red dragon warns that he will be the tutor of the little one from now on, but the hatchling complains and demands mentally for the boy to let him go soon. The small bird chirps angry and flies furious to defend its protector, but the redhead demands in a firm way for the bird to stay quiet and not meddle in their conversation. Prediction warns with seriousness that he will not make things easy just because of him being very much a baby, and that the little one should not even think about slacking in training. The hatchling lets out a bored sigh and wonders, quite ironic, what exactly a boy of that age would have useful to teach him in the future. The hatchling thinks that he is the one who should give classes after receiving the inheritance magic, and wonders what he will do with that cheeky redhead kid. The young red dragon lets out a sigh of superiority and displays a proud smile on his face, feeling like the true master of the situation. The small phoenix gets irritated again and begins to emanate flames around the boy, who complains angry, asking what it thinks it is doing. The cute bird assumes an intimidating posture surrounded by wild fire, leaving it clear that it will not accept that anyone treats its protector badly. The red-haired boy stares at it with seriousness and demands respect, affirming with grandeur that he will be the future supreme leader of the entire fire clan. He extends his hand, channeling his own fire magic to show his power, creating an impressive barrier of flames around himself. The hatchling notices that the youth is restraining his strength in training and reflects that, even being a baby, a phoenix always will be a powerful, divine creature. Suddenly, the flames get out of control and spread in a dangerous way, leaving the young red dragon startled at that unexpected reaction. The small bird chirps, startled upon realizing that the strength of the fire increased too much and that someone there runs the risk of ending up burned for real. The dragon hatchling assumes an intense expression upon noticing the danger and concludes that that small phoenix truly is much more than it seems. With a lot of bravery, the hatchling leaps in front to protect the bird from the intense heat, declaring mentally that it is his precious subordinate. In the same instant, he feels a strange magical sensation run through his body and focuses his eyes in an attentive way to understand what happened. She holds him worried in her arms back to the crib and asks distressed for her beloved baby to wake up and recover from all that tiredness. The little dragon lets out a weak groan and opens his eyes slowly, coming across the sad and tear-filled expression of his guardian. He extends his small little paw and holds her fingers with affection to comfort her and show that he is already recovering from that big effort. She smiles relieved and says with sweetness that she prepared a special and highly nutritious meal to help him recover all his strengths quickly. The hatchling gets extremely excited with the promise of tasty food after almost dying, imagining what the flavor of that special feast will be. He stays salivating with so much hunger and anxiety, but his excitement is interrupted when she places the mysterious dish right before him. Upon looking at the food, he realizes with horror that it is that same bizarre mandrake root that almost killed him from pain in the forest. The little dragon gets completely paralyzed with dread while staring at the plant, unable to believe he will have to eat that again. He swallows hard and trembles with fear, realizing that his beloved guardian intends to make him eat the terrible poison as part of the treatment. Christina offers a very sweet candy apple if the hatchling manages to eat all the mandrake soup. The hatchling thinks that she went to all the trouble of preparing that, and remembers that, in the end, he is not even a real child. He tries to encourage himself, thinking he has already eaten poisonous mandrakes before, and that a bit of soup should be no big deal. With a lot of determination, the little dragon chomps down a piece of that bizarre root all at once. However, as soon as he senses the taste in his mouth, his eyes widen in complete shock. The hatchling begins to cry out of despair and screams in a lot of agony because of the extremely bitter flavor of that food. Christina says that she understands very well his feeling, but insists that he needs to finish eating everything. The hatchling wonders if that is some type of punishment and complains that the small bird gets all the tasty cookies. He cries, begging for real food, and asks for a bit of those cookies instead of that horrible slop. Christina praises him for finishing and offers the promised candy apple to help take the bitter taste out of the mouth. He finally manages to breathe relieved upon licking the sweet, thinking that the sweetness at least cancels out the bad taste from before. A silence settles over the location while Christina and the small bird observe the little dragon savor his prize. The hatchling squeezes the small bird lightly, remembering he was anxious for thinking he had misjudged that small creature. Fortunately, in the end, everything turned out well, and the two seem to be getting along very well now. At that, Christina warns that they soon will receive a special visit from another child. She asks for him not to show much of his power, leaving the hatchling curious if the guest is also a baby dragon. She explains that surviving the inheritance spell being so young is an incredible feat and does not want the other to feel threatened near him. The boy's name is Prediction, and he is the next leader in the line of succession of the Red Dragon's clan. Suddenly, a floating screen arises before the little dragon's eyes, leaving him quite surprised at that appearance. He comes across the boy's information on the screen and wonders if that is part of his inheritance magic. By Christina's calm reaction, he soon realizes that only he manages to see that magical window of the system. He finds the system quite simple and decides to take a look to see if he finds something else interesting to check. Christina comments that he must be very hungry after having spent so much energy lately. She then reveals a portal filled with delicious foods that she prepared especially for the small recovery feast. The hatchling throws himself into the food and celebrates the inheritance magic, which now he accepts. With open arms, Christina observes the little one devour everything very fast and comments thoughtful that maybe it is still a bit early for what she plans, but she thinks it is already time for he to begin thinking about choosing a definitive name for himself. A dragon must choose his own name, since it serves as a trigger to release his special ability of the words. The hatchling wonders if his old name would sound strange in this new world, as he still feels a strong connection to it. He remembers when he was called Mook for being all black, suggesting the name Lee Mook in honor of the last name of his creator. At that time, the man explained that an Imugi turns dragon after 1,000 years, and that, even small now, he would have a great future. He continued saying with affection that the small Lemuk maybe would become a being capable of ruling the entire world. Although it had been so long that he did not even remember that man's face, the hatchling still felt a unique bond with the name Lemuk. Realizing the little dragon's hesitation, Christina pats his head and says sweetly for him not to be in a hurry. She is impressed with the clarity of his telepathy and asks if using this advanced spell does not tire him out too much. He finds it great to be able to speak, while Christina praises him mentally for mastering a high-level magic with such ease. The dragon hatchling looks at the small phoenix and thinks that he also should give a name to it soon. Suddenly, Christina seems to sense a presence approaching and interrupts the moment of rest with the hatchlings. She smiles in a friendly way and comments that the moment of arrival of the visit was simply perfect. She warns that she will step out real quick to receive the young Prediction and soon will be back with him. Next, she asks with affection if the little ones also would like to go along with her to give the welcome. The hatchling knows that Christina is very loving, but decides to go to use the other hatchling as a baseline of power comparison. With the positive response from the little ones, she agrees cheerfully and guides them to go meet the guest he had been researching about the new world. And, although there were similarities to his past life, what shocked him most during the trip was discovering the details about Christina, revealing that she is a legendary golden dragon with more than 3,000 years. Her status showed that she led the Golden Clan, fought in the Holy War, and even helped recover the world of humans. The hatchling reflects on how all the titles she carries are extremely important and filled with responsibility. Before such grandeur, he wonders how a being so important and legendary ended up becoming his nanny. She thanks for the coming of the youth and greets him affectionately, while the hatchling focuses his eyes on the red-haired youth. That mysterious boy before them was none other than the legitimate heir of the entire Fire clan. Prediction bows politely and says that it is a great honor to be able to meet Christina again. The young redhead greets her formally as the great leader of the Golden Dragons clan. Next, the youth looks down and asks if that one there is the newborn black dragon. Christina confirms cheerfully, commenting that the hatchling is small, but already is quite remarkable. The young redhead approaches, calling him small, causing the little dragon to let out a sound of doubt. Prediction says that it is a pleasure to meet him, but maintains a serious posture before the hatchling. The young red dragon stays in silence for a brief instant, staring at the little one with firmness. He begins to lower himself slowly to the hatchling's height, who observes him with a lot of attention. Suddenly, the proto feels something strange coming from the youth and wonders what that was. He stays alert, questioning if what he just felt coming from the redhead was a wave of hostility. Christina holds the hatchling worried in her arms and begs desperately for the little one to wake up. The little dragon lets out a weak groan, causing her to ask, relieved if he is okay. He extends his small little paw and holds tight to her clothes to show that he is already recovering his senses. The hatchling opens his eyes slowly and calls for his beloved guardian in a very affectionate way. Christina flashes an enormous smile and cries with emotion, seeing that her beloved baby finally woke up. She hugs him tight and thanks the heavens for him having held strong through all that trial. The hatchling thinks that he almost died, and that if he were a bit weaker, he already would be a dead dragon. She says it was very difficult, and suggests that they eat something to recover strengths, as she prepared a special dish. The little one gets super excited thinking about how wonderful the flavor of this special meal must be. Christina then presents with sweetness the dish she prepared with so much affection for her hatchling. He looks at the dish and sees bitter medicinal herbs that are great to strengthen his body. The dragon. Hatchling gets completely paralyzed with dread, seeing that food of terrible appearance. He cries asking for milk and eggs instead of that, but she warns that this would cut the effect of the medicine. But she promises that if he eats everything properly, he will win a delicious candy apple as a prize. The proto swallows hard and resolves to accept, reminding himself that he is not a real baby. He encourages himself thinking he has already eaten pure mandrake before, and that a piece of root would not defeat him. With a lot of courage, the little dragon chomps down the bitter medicinal plant all at once. However, the instant the taste hits his mouth, his eyes widen in complete despair. The hatchling begins to cry in agony from the absurdly bitter flavor of that terrible medicine. Christina says that she understands his pain, but insists with affection that he needs to eat everything to get better. He complains mentally that that looks like a punishment and envies the small bird that is winning cookies. The hatchling cries begging for tasty food and asks to win something good instead of that horrible slop. She praises him for finishing everything and hands over the bright candy apple to clear his palate. He feels that he came back to life with the sweet, thinking that the sweetness at least disguises the bad taste from before. The two stay in silence while Christina and the small bird observe the little dragon eat his sweet. The hatchling squeezes the phoenix lightly and admits he was worried for thinking he had misjudged the bird, but he sees that everything is fine and feels an enormous relief for having no problem with the little creature. At that, Christina warns that they soon will receive an important visit in their golden palace. She asks for him not to reveal much of his real power near the guest, who is also a child. She explains that a hatchling with 1 month accepting the inheritance magic perfectly is something incredible that would cause suspicion. The name of the boy who is arriving is Perdition, and he will be the future leader of the Red Dragon's clan. Suddenly, a magical information screen floats in front of the hatchling, leaving him confused. He sees the detailed profile of the boy on the screen and wonders if that is an effect of the inheritance magic. By Christina's calm reaction, he soon realizes that only he manages to see that magical screen. The proto finds the system very easy to read and decides to investigate what else he can discover there. Christina comments that he spent a lot of energy and must be starving after everything. She opens a magical portal filled with delicious foods that she prepared for his feast. The hatchling throws himself into the delicious food and celebrates a lot for having received that inheritance magic. Christina observes him eat joyfully and comments thoughtful that, although it still seems a bit early, it is already time for he to begin thinking about choosing a definitive name for himself. A dragon must choose his own name, since it serves as a trigger to release his special unique ability of the dragons. The hatchling wonders if his old name would sound strange in this new world, even though he still feels a strong connection to it. He remembers when they called him Muck for being all black, suggesting the name Lee Muck in honor of the last name of his creator. At that time, the man explained that an Amugi turns dragon after 1,000 years, and that, even small now, he would have a great future. He continued saying with affection that the small Lee Mook maybe would become a being capable of ruling the entire world someday. Although it had been so long that he did not even remember that man's face, the hatchling warns that he has already decided on his name. Realizing the little dragon's hesitation, Christina pats his head and says sweetly for him not to be in a hurry. She is impressed with the clarity of his telepathy and asks if using this advanced spell does not tire him out too much. He finds it great to be able to speak, while Christina praises him mentally for mastering a high-level magic with such ease. The dragon hatchling looks at the small phoenix and thinks that he also should give a name to it soon. Suddenly, Christina seems to sense a presence approaching and interrupts the moment of rest with the hatchlings. She smiles in a friendly way and comments that the moment of arrival of the visit was simply perfect. She warns that she will step out real quick to receive the young Perdition and soon will be back with him. Next, she asks with affection if the little ones also would like to go along with her to give the welcome. He knows that Christina is very loving, but decides to go to use the other hatchling as a baseline of power comparison. With the positive response from the little ones, she agrees cheerfully and guides them to go meet the guest he had been researching about the new world. And although there were similarities to his past life, what shocked him most during the trip was discovering the details about Christina, revealing that she is a legendary golden dragon with more than 3,000 years. Her status showed that she led the Golden Clan, fought in the Holy War, and even helped recover the world of humans. The hatchling reflects on how all the titles she carries are extremely important and filled with responsibility. Before such grandeur, he wonders how a being so important and legendary ended up becoming his nanny. She thanks for the coming of the youth and greets him affectionately, while the hatchling focuses his eyes on the red-haired youth. That mysterious boy before them was none other than the legitimate heir of the entire Fire Clan. Perdition bows politely and says that it is a great honor to be able to meet Christina again. The young redhead greets her formally as the great leader of the Golden Dragons clan. Next, the youth looks down and asks if that one there is the newborn black dragon. Christina confirms cheerfully, commenting that the hatchling is small, but already is quite remarkable. The young redhead approaches, calling him small, causing the little dragon to let out a sound of doubt. Perdition says that it is a pleasure to meet him, but maintains a serious posture before the hatchling. The young red dragon stays in silence for a brief instant. Staring at the little one with firmness, he begins to lower himself slowly to the hatchling's height, who observes him with a lot of attention. Suddenly, the proto feels something strange coming from the youth and wonders what that was. He stays alert, questioning if what he just felt coming from the redhead was a wave of hostility. The little dragon notices that the youth quickly dismissed the hostility, trying to disguise his behavior. He finds that reaction very strange, because the young redhead would have no real motives to attack him with his gaze. After all, anyone looking from the outside would think they were mortal enemies, even having just met each other. He brags about being a special dragon, but is interrupted when the small bird on his head begins to get restless. The small bird begins to flap its wings very hard, calling everyone's attention with its shrill chirps. The bird prepares to release its magical energy in a quite surprising way before the two youths. Suddenly, the small bird glows intensely, releasing a powerful aura of sacred flames around itself. Christina is shocked by the sudden demonstration of power from the phoenix and observes the scene quite surprised. The red-haired youth murmurs, confused, asking himself what that small and cute glowing creature on the dragon's head would be. Perdition tries to disguise the surprise and asks what type of bird that would be, while the hatchling laughs mentally. Christina explains, smiling, that that small bird of different appearance is, in fact, a phoenix hatchling. The youth is incredulous to know that, arguing that the phoenix of the previous generation should still be alive in this world. He comments that he never saw something like this happen before, and reveals that the clan leader is also monitoring the situation from close. The youth accepts the explanation and stays quiet at the same time, making the hatchling notice how much he respects the leader. Christina strokes Perdition's red hair with sweetness and thanks once more for him having come all the way there. She asks affectionately for the youth to be a good older brother to the small dragon, and the young redhead accepts the request promptly. The hatchling is amused seeing the youth's disappointment when the stroking ends, thinking that, in the end, he is still just a child. Even finding it funny, the hatchling still remembers that cold look from before and decides he needs to do something. He cannot forget the sudden hostility from the red-haired youth and stays thinking about the reason for so much coldness. The little dragon decides that the best thing to do at that moment is to test the boy to see how he reacts. He leaps in Perdition's direction, leaving the young red dragon surprised at that sudden approach. The small one extends his chubby little paws in the air with plenty of cuteness, preparing to give a touch on the youth's head. He touches softly on Perdition's forehead and thinks that now is the moment to see what his true reaction will be. He knows that from the outside it looks like just baby play, but if someone you hate touches your head, the reaction is inevitable. Perdition is totally disconcerted and asks what the hatchling thinks it is doing, while the small one observes everything. Upon looking close, the proto realizes that the red-haired youth got his face completely red with shame. The hatchling gets confused, noticing that that timid reaction was not what he expected, questioning if the boy really hates him. He was sure he had felt hostility before, so he decides to do one more quick test to clear the doubt. The young red dragon complains angry at the insistence, calling the small one's attention with a firm look. The hatchling throws himself with everything into Perdition's arms in a totally relaxed and joyful way. He almost falls to the floor face first, but Perdicion holds him quickly in his arms while the hatchling celebrates the success of the plan. Christina appears quite startled and asks worried if the two are fine after that sudden movement. She apologizes and jokes, saying that the hatchling must just be excited to finally have an older brother. Perdition holds the hatchling with care, asking if he got hurt, while realizing that the small one tried to protect him. The boy blushes even more and tries to thank awkwardly for the small one having cushioned their fall. He continues quite embarrassed and asks with a trembling tone of voice if the little dragon truly did not get hurt. But he soon tries to disguise his concern and tells the hatchling to simply forget what happened. The redhead tells the small one to get off of him, acting in a cold way right after having shown so much concern for him. The hatchling moves away, thinking that all that hostility was just shyness from someone who does not know how to deal with feelings. He finds it funny how a boy of that age manages to be so proud and incapable of being honest with himself, but the proto reflects that deep down, he can comprehend the past and the difficulties of that youth. Perdition coughs embarrassed and warns that the hatchling is too young to understand everything, but should not act like that with just anyone. The youth looks at the small dragon and murmurs thoughtful about how he truly is very small and fragile. Christina comments, smiling that Perdition also was already very small one day, though he was a bit larger than the little dragon. He says he cannot imagine himself that size, and she agrees, remembering that it makes so much time that he would not remember. Christina confesses with a nostalgic look that she has not been having many opportunities to see the youth lately, but she guarantees with a docile smile that she still remembers perfectly when he was just a baby. She recalls with affection how Perdition was a sweet and adorable little creature when he had just been born in the clan. Upon hearing those gentle words from the guardian, the red-haired youth is completely bashful and blushes with emotion. The hatchling observes his reaction from very close and feels that something different is about to happen at that moment. Suddenly, the little dragon's stomach begins to growl very loudly again, interrupting the emotional mood. The sound echoes through the entire golden hall, leaving the three in complete silence before that funny situation. He covers his face, dying of shame, and thinks that that absurd hunger must be a side effect of the lack of mana. The hatchling wonders what type of bottomless stomach that is. Since he ate an entire feast and continues hungry, Christina suggests with amusement that the two play together while she goes to fetch some more things for them to eat. She moves away down the corridor floating and asks with affection for the two not to make any exaggerated mess there. The little dragon sees her leave and in the same instant hears the red-haired youth call him with a rather cold tone of voice. The redhead sits on the floor in a serious way and calls him with disdain, causing the hatchling to wonder if he was just acting before. Without warning, the youth holds firm the chubby cheeks of the little dragon, leaving him completely shocked at the attitude he squeezes and pulls the hatchling's soft cheeks with strength, grumbling that that little dragon truly is very small. The youth continues squeezing and says that that is the youngest one that he must train, while the hatchling demands mentally for him to let go. The small bird advances furious to defend its master, but Perdition tells the bird to stay quiet and not intromit in the conversation. The young red dragon warns with authority that he will be the tutor of the little one, and that he will not tolerate any laziness in training. The little dragon lets out a bored sigh and wonders what exactly a boy of that age would have to teach him. He thinks that he is the one who should give classes after receiving the inheritance magic, and wonders what he will do with that red-haired boy. Meanwhile, Perdition lets out a sigh of superiority and displays an extremely proud smile on his face. He points surprised to the cute bird and asks what the small bird thinks it is doing, emanating fire. The young red dragon is shocked by the audacity of the cute bird in challenging him in that manner. He says with grandeur for the bird not to be insolent before one who will become the great leader of the entire fire clan. To prove his point, the red-haired youth extends his hand and channels his flames, creating an impressive barrier of fire. The proto notices that the youth is restraining his strength and reflects that, even being a baby, a phoenix always will be powerful. Suddenly, the fire begins to spread in a dangerous and uncontrolled way, scaring the young red dragon. The small phoenix chirps, startled upon realizing that the heat increased too much and that she runs the risk of getting burned there. The hatchling assumes a serious expression upon noticing the danger and concludes that Phoenix truly is very special to him. With a lot of bravery, the hatchling leaps into the middle of the flames to protect the small bird, declaring that she is his subordinate. He positions himself in a firm way in front of the phoenix, reaffirming to himself that the little creature is his precious familiar in the same instant. A strong gust of wind and flames begins to whirl intensely around the small black dragon. He focuses his eyes in an attentive way and feels a strange wave of magical energy circulate through his small body. Perdition shouts desperate and asks what the hell the hatchling thinks it is doing, throwing itself straight into the fire. The youth quickly undoes the flames so as not to hurt him, taking a deep breath while trying to recover from the scare. The hatchling reflects that, no matter how important the guest is, he already is under the absolute protection of Christina. He knows that whoever tries to hurt him inside, there will not just be expelled, but will have to face her relentless fury. The Proto narrows his eyes and thinks that, although his guardian is very kind, she still is extremely powerful. The red-haired youth stares at him irritated, grumbling that cheeky little dragon has no inkling of danger and loves to cross the line. Perdition mocks, saying for him to look at himself trying to play the protector, while the hatchling sighs bored with the boy. He concludes that he will have to deal with that cheeky kid and wonders what the Red Clan leader has been teaching him. The little dragon holds the bird protectively and questions himself if he should just ignore the provocations and pretend to be an ordinary baby. However, he resolves that he cannot let things pass smoothly, since the two will have to live together from now on. He decides that the best thing is to put the boy in his proper place while he is still young, planning his next step. Perdition observes him with suspicion and wonders what that black dragon hatchling is plotting. The youth focuses his red eyes on him in an intimidating way, decided to establish once and for all who commands there. Suddenly, a gigantic and frightening silhouette of a blue dragon arises imposing behind the small black dragon. Perdition begins to sweat from dread and despairs with the overwhelming pressure, feeling that he barely manages to breathe. The black dragon hatchling merely raises his small little paw, wrapped in an aura of dark and mysterious energy. He gives a light tap on the youth's forehead with his little paw, discharging all that oppressive intention all at once. The red-haired boy falls backward, completely terrified with the strength of that unexpected spiritual strike. The little dragon moves away calmly and thinks that should suffice, while Perdition stares at him, trembling on the floor. Stammering from fear, the youth asks what he really is and how he can possess such a frightening aura being just a baby. The hatchling notes that the boy's mental resistance is very weak, but ponders that he himself trained his own mind for 900 years. He thinks that no matter how much the youth tries to stare at him angry now, he only looks like a startled wild little animal. Still, the hatchling recognizes that his instincts are sharp and that, despite the fear, the redhead possesses an incredible talent. He concludes that the boy was raised only by the clan leader, and for that reason never had the chance to develop emotionally in a healthy way. The little dragon comprehends the situation, and wonders if it was precisely for this reason that his guardian gathered them there. He realizes that Christina cannot be a friend of equal status to Perdition, and for that reason wanted the two to be play companions. He reflects that winning the sympathy of the future leader of the Fire Clan also will bring many advantages for him in the future. He sees that the boy is just timid and socially clumsy, and that probably he will be an extremely loyal ally when he truly opens up. The hatchling approaches slowly and pulls the boy's pants lightly, thinking that first he needs to make him lower his guard. He decides to use all his natural cuteness and begins to stroke the boy's leg to soften his heart. He plans to pretend that the frightening aura from before was just a baby accident that does not yet know how to control his own magical powers. The black dragon hatchling makes an extremely sad and needy face, letting out a docile whimper to convince the youth. The plan works perfectly, seeing that the redhead completely lowered his guard, remembering that hatchlings truly tend to lose control of mana. Now that the ice has been broken, the Proto begins to plan what will be the best strategy to build a solid friendship with him. He knows that imposing dominance by force would be the easiest way to make him obey, but that would reveal the secret of his inheritance magic. In addition, he concludes that the boy's habit of belittling the weak comes from the rigid and oppressive education he received to become the heir. The hatchling thinks that he would love to give a scolding to the one responsible for the boy's training, especially comparing him to his sweet guardian Christina. Suddenly, Christina returns to the hall with a beautiful smile on her face and asks cheerfully if the two small ones are playing properly. Perdition points curious to the basket she is carrying, and she responds with sympathy, asking if he wants to see what she brought. Christina shows a basket filled with sweets and warns that they are the hatchling's favorite snacks, suggesting that the guests try them too. The youth thanks timidly, while the little dragon and the small bird shout super excited seeing all that delicious food. Perdition focuses on the food and notices something special, while Christina comments that the hatchling truly loves snacks filled with mana. The young redhead is surprised and wonders how a baby can have a diet based on mana, something that he had never seen before. He is suspicious of the small one's attitude, thinking that a hatchling should not need so much mana unless he has a hidden motive in the end. The youth concludes that the little dragon must just have strange tastes, and that all that concern must be nonsense on his part. Perdition interrupts his thoughts upon feeling a light pull on his leg, and looks down quite intrigued. He sees the small black dragon extending a cookie with a cute face, wondering the reason for that. The hatchling offers the cookie willingly, and asks mentally for the red-haired boy to stop thinking so much and just eat. The young red dragon hesitates for an instant, but ends up taking the snack from the small one's paw with a lot of care. Without saying anything, the red-haired boy brings the cookie close to his mouth and takes a bite to try the sweet. In the same instant, Perdition's eyes glow with satisfaction, and he blushes upon realizing how tasty that cookie is. The hatchling savors his own cookie with a winning little smile on his face, happy to see that the plan worked out. He celebrates mentally that the red-haired boy fell hook, line, and sinker for his friendship tactic through food. After all, he knows very well that it is impossible to hate someone who feeds you, and that sweets always leave anyone in a good mood. In addition, seeing the youth eating happy finally makes him look like a normal child, which already is a gigantic evolution. The hatchling thinks that enjoying the food and making a sour face when it ends are the most natural and honest reactions for someone of that age. He reflects that there are two types of dishonest people, the first being those who choose to lie out of habit and pure malice. The second type are those who end up being forced by circumstances and by other people to live a constant lie. Since this false personality is molded by pure external pressure, there is a great chance that they change if the environment changes, especially if there is someone willing to approach for real, share what they have, and understand their hidden feelings. The Proto remembers that no one is born perfect, and since he himself already received a lot of help in the past from other important people, he thinks it would be fair to give at least a chance for that red-haired boy to prove himself a good companion. The hatchling stares at him thoughtful for a few moments, deciding to close his plan with a golden touch. He thinks that if the plan fails, the boy will just be a lost case, but decides to try anyway, because deep down, he is quite good-natured. On top of that, he knows that having the future leader of the Red Clan as an ally in adult life will be of great help for his plans. With that practical thought in mind, the Black Dragon hatchling decides that it is worth the try to make friends with the youth. He opens an extremely docile and cute smile, using all his baby dragon cuteness to conquer the red-haired boy. The small one extends the milk bottle in Perdition's direction, thinking that there is no harm at all in doing that good deed. He lets out one more adorable whimper, focused on softening once and for all the stone heart of that proud youth. The Proto analyzes the current situation, thinking that the change of environment is limited due to finding themselves only in that location. He assesses that Christina already is a formidable ally on her own, and that he himself manages to keep the bird under control. The hatchling eats one more piece of cookie, and concludes that it is worth testing one more detail with the guest before he goes away. Suddenly, the small one breaks the mana cookie in half, and lets out a sound of surprise seeing the piece come loose. He walks slowly to where the red-haired youth is sitting, and stares at him with a lot of curiosity in his gaze. The hatchling offers half of his sweet to Perdition, leaving the boy confused and without understanding why he won that piece. The small one points to the cookie and makes a gesture, causing Perdition to ask if he wants him to break the sweet again. The hatchling lets out a docile grunt and points in the direction of the cute bird, leaving the red-haired youth with a slight suspicion. Perdition deduces shocked that the little dragon wants him to crumble the cookie to feed the pet bird. The youth complains angry that he will not do something so troublesome, but shivers seeing the sad and begging face that the small one makes. He lets out a sigh of defeat and squeezes the cookie in his hand, breaking the sweet into small little pieces as requested. The small one celebrates internally, finding it great to see the red-haired youth finally learning to treat someone younger with affection. The boy extends his hand filled with cookie crumbs to the bird, who looks quite curious at the snack. With his face completely blushed, the proud youth says softly for the small bird to eat that quickly from his hand. To the boy's surprise, the cute bird makes a face of disdain and totally ignores his offer of food. The red-haired boy gets irritated at the same time, while the bird runs to hide behind its protector's little paws. The little dragon is shocked seeing the bird ruin his brilliant friendship plan by refusing the boy's gift. With a scary look, the hatchling forces the phoenix to eat the sweet from the boy's hand, leaving Perdition totally confused. Christina observes the scene from afar with sweetness and comments happy that the children seem to be getting along wonderfully well. Completely awkward, Perdition turns his gaze away and murmurs timidly that was nothing special. The red-haired youth turns his gaze away slowly, but his thoughts continue focused on everything he just experienced right there. He reflects in silence that never in his life had he experienced a feeling of warmth and welcoming so great like that one. Having the small bird eating from his hand brings him a slightly ticklish feeling, but at the same time quite embarrassing. He feels that that place is much gentler than his home, creating an internal conflict between wanting to flee or never leaving again. Perditium begins to speak softly, appearing finally to make an important decision before his hostess. The youth comments in a sincere way that the small black dragon truly seems to have a good eye to judge the people around him. He remembers his father's advice, who had said that the small one would be the heir of the Dark Clan and that he should help him. The boy gathers courage and asks if there would be any problem if he returned on the following day, receiving a joyful confirmation from her. He warns that he will return tomorrow since today was just to introduce himself, and Christina offers to accompany him to the exit. A strong magical light begins to glow around them on the floor, preparing the teleportation spell to take them to the entrance. The youth says goodbye, saying that he will see them tomorrow, while the black dragon hatchling responds with a docile and friendly wave. After the youth goes away, Christina praises the hatchling for the good work and asks what he thought of the young guest. The small one thinks that whoever educated the boy should have their license revoked, but knows that obviously he cannot say something like that out loud. He responds by telepathy that the boy pretends to be polite, but in truth is a great liar, leaving his guardian surprised. He explains that the redhead attacks when he is afraid and pretends to hate what he likes, looking like a wounded cat, and quite weird. Christina stays thoughtful with the hatchling's analysis and comments in an understanding way that she understands very well what he wants to say. She explains that the boy was forced to live only a rigid type of life, focused on being a leader, with no room for common feelings. On the following morning, Perditium appears super early, and the hatchling yawns with laziness, questioning who wakes up at dawn like that. The small one wonders at what time the youth needed to wake up to arrive so early and so impeccably dressed at their house. Upon seeing the youth lower himself and interact with the bird, the hatchling ponders that maybe what Christina said on the previous day is true. He concludes that the red-haired boy deep down is not a bad person completely, since he demonstrates plenty of affection with the phoenix. The Proto thinks that if the boy were bad, Christina would never leave them together, formulating a new theory about the youth. He remembers that the phoenix shares the same element of fire as Perditium, which should generate a great natural connection between the two. However, the bird prefers to follow the black dragon instead of the redhead, even possessing a magical strength as extraordinary as theirs. Since Perditium is very talented, he must have noticed the bird's strength, and for that reason acted with so much suspicion upon finding it. Christina gives a tender pat on the hatchling's head and asks for him to help the youth lower his guard, receiving a positive response. The hatchling theorizes that Perditium's hostility on the first day may have been just the youth sensing his enormous magical potential. The redhead's status reveals that after losing his mother, he buried his feelings to live only focused on his obligation as heir. Before such rigidity, the small one wonders if that cold attitude is not just a mask to hide his own vulnerability. He reflects that a personality like that, molded by so much pressure, can change easily if it is in a more welcoming environment. It would suffice just for someone to approach him in a sincere way, without interests behind their daily actions. Since the Proto himself already received a lot of help in the past from incredible people, he decides that it is worth trying the same with him. He thinks it would be fair to give at least a chance for that red-haired youth to prove himself a true friend and companion. If things do not work out after the attempts, he simply will cast him aside and consider him a lost case. In addition, having the future leader of the Red Dragon's clan by his side as a loyal ally will bring great benefits in the future. The youth explains that the ring possesses metamorphosis magic, and that he brought it to help in the communication between the two during daily training. He says that they will have many difficult lessons ahead, and that he used this same ring a lot when he was smaller to train. He teaches that the object adjusts itself, and that the small one only needs to channel his own mana, thinking of the form he wishes to assume. The little dragon closes his eyes and begins to focus all his magical energy to activate the metamorphosis power contained in the ring. A bright aura of pink energy spreads through the golden hall as the body of the small one begins to change form slowly. The spell advances rapidly and reveals the contours of human legs and feet arising through the magical glows of the transformation. The magical light finally dissipates completely, revealing a beautiful little boy of dark hair floating in the air in a graceful way. He opens his beautiful eyes of bright reddish tone, revealing his new and super cute human appearance to the red-haired youth. The small one displays a quite mischievous and intelligent look, feeling extremely satisfied with the success of his transformation. With a lot of joy, the little boy flies and strokes lightly Perdition's head, exclaiming happy that finally he can speak directly with him. He focuses his curious gaze on the young tutor's face, observing very close what his reaction will be to that surprise. The Prota smiles in a docile and fun way, taking advantage of his new human form to interact better with everyone around. He continues giving a stroke to the youth's red hair with a lot of enthusiasm and calls his name with a cute and joyful voice. The small one floats joyfully through the golden hall while admiring the success of his new human body obtained through the magical ring. He positions himself in a cute way before Perdition, anxious to give start to the first big training class they will have today. The Prota opens his eyes in his human form and gives a friendly smile to begin the conversation in a very docile way. The little boy touches Perdition's head and celebrates with joy because finally he manages to speak directly with him. Perdition brushes away the small one's hand from his head and complains that he should not stay touching others like that. The youth asks if he feels something strange, and the little boy thinks that it would be good if that human form were a bit larger. At least now he already manages to speak normally and to move around with much more ease there. The small one tests his own voice and finds it much more comfortable to stay with the level of the eyes higher than before. He gives a radiant smile and thanks the youth, saying that that human form truly is very useful. Perdition is surprised and a bit awkward, seeing the cuteness and the sincere gratitude of the small dragon. The young tutor turns his gaze away and crosses his arms to try and hide his embarrassment before that scene. At that, the small bird approaches flying, and the Prota asks if the bird recognized him even after changing form. Perdition complains and asks for him to put away the bird once and for all, warning that the little animal will only disrupt their class. The Prota extends the bird and explains that the small companion also wants to watch the training classes. Perdition asks if he wants the bird to participate in the private classes, and the small one says that Christina already gave permission for that. The redhead questions why he would accept that and says that, although Christina does the small one's wishes, he will not give in so easy. With a teasing smile, Perdition tells the little boy to understand the situation and accept his refusal once and for all. The small bird gets extremely irritated with the provocation and begins to release a strong energy against the youth. The small one notices that Perdition carries a lot of accumulated anger and thinks that staying mad is not bad, but there are limits to everything he reflects that a ruler who does not know how to control his anger turns into an ignorant tyrant and resolves to call his attention. The small one places the bird in Perdition's direction and asks for the young tutor to hold the little animal for an instant. While the bird gets confused, the Prota says that the redhead is with his guard way too high with a simple little hatchling. Perdition thinks that that freeloading bird does not know its own place and that anyone hostile must be totally crushed. Then, the Prota warns the young tutor that he is very mistaken about a very important detail. He reveals that the bird knows its place and even tried to threaten Christina before, leaving Perdition completely shocked. The small one explains that the hatchling only is suspicious of him to protect him, and that maybe it sensed something strong coming from the redhead. Perdition is left without words upon hearing that, and begins to rethink the attitude of the small firebird. The Prota continues his line of reasoning and suggests that they think about this in a much simpler way. He throws the idea that the bird acts like that simply because the young tutor is much stronger than it. The little boy explains that the redhead is powerful enough to make the small bird feel threatened by trying to protect its master. The hatchling feels the youth's great strength in a much more intense way and stays alert. Perdition asks if he really thinks like that, and the little boy responds on the spot that he has absolute certainty of it. The young tutor confesses that he never thought from that side, while the small one notices that he hit dead on with his argument. The Prota reflects that the youth learned to be cautious and to threaten, but deep down does not trust his own strength. This shows him that the boy's father never gave the approval or the real support that he so much needed to receive. He analyzes that this can be good now, since before that cold aura of the youth gave no opening for approach. The small one tells that the bird also is an immortal creature and guarantees that it will calm down if the youth does not treat it with hatred. The little boy shows how the hatchling is calm, and the tutor agrees that it truly seems well behaved now. Upon seeing that Perdition has a good moral sense, the Prota feels a great relief while the little hatchling chirps lightly. The small one decides not to push it with the youth, knowing that he will live much longer than any ordinary human. The youth surrenders and accepts letting the bird participate in the class, although he admits that he still does not like the little animal much. The young tutor comments in a low tone that it is never easy to separate from someone who is extremely important to us. The Prota observes Perdition's sad face and realizes that he is speaking of his own personal history. He knows that the youth lost his mother and understands perfectly that he misses her so much in his daily life. Still, he thinks the youth is lucky to be able to live a long life instead of just existing like an empty shell. He concludes that fighting accompanied is better than loneliness and hopes that the two get closer in the future. Suddenly, Perdition remembers a detail and asks what the name of the small bird that accompanies him is. The youth gets intrigued and asks if he really still has not given a name to his own pet companion. The little boy gets half awkward and hesitates for an instant, trying to think of a fast response to give to the tutor. The Prota looks affectionately at the hatchling in his hands and finally decides how he will call it from then on, with a radiant smile on his face. The little boy announces with pride that the name of the small bird will be Begia Perdition, repeats the curious name, and the Prota explains with joy that the chosen word means white knight. The Prota remembers that the little animal was born upon swallowing his own darkness and confirms to the hatchling that its name now is Baegya. The bird rubs its face on the boy, demonstrating a lot of joy, and the small one is surprised to see that the little animal liked the name so much. Perdition notices that the small dragon still does not have a name, and warns that he already entered contact with Christina to treat this. The little boy understands that he never had anyone to give him a name and decides not to take it serious. Knowing that Perdition does not speak out of malice, Perdition says that he has no one besides Christina to help choose a name and offers to give a hand if he wants. The small one responds immediately that he is fine and does not need help, leaving the young tutor completely shocked at the direct refusal. The little boy explains that he intended to think with calm about this, and that it is not as if he needed a name with such urgency. Perdition argues that they will have regular classes and that it is going to be very difficult to call him during training if he does not have a name. The small one gets intrigued and wonders why the youth is insisting so much with a request that seems a bit irrational. He knows very well that the name of a dragon is a delicate subject, and that the red-haired youth certainly should know that too. The small one reflects that he needs to be very cautious, because what the youth is asking is not just any name, but rather his true name. He knows he needs to analyze well the situation to avoid any problem and consider even the worst scenario possible. The little boy maintains himself in constant alert and thinks that the youth's impatience may hide some motive behind it. He suspects that all this haste of Perdition may have started from a direct order of some elder of his clan. The true name of a dragon proves its own existence, and, although it does not give total control, allows using certain powers over the target. In addition, the revelation of this sacred name is essential to close and sign contracts of extreme importance between the parties. Delivering this name to someone is the same as giving to that person the right to intervene directly in your own life and destiny. For being something so personal, only parents should deal with this, and the small one wonders if the redhead wants to test if he already understands about the subject. Perdition says that. If it is so, he should at least think about how he wants to call him, just like he does when he speaks with Lady Christina. The youth explains that his name of common use is Perdition, but that the truth behind his identity goes a bit beyond that. He reveals that his true dragon name is much longer, pointing out that the small one too is hiding his own name. The Prota sighs lightly and wonders if he will have to use his powers to probe discreetly the youth's mind once more. The young tutor makes a serious proposal and says that if the small one reveals his true name to him, things will change. He promises that, in exchange for the little boy's sincerity, he too will reveal his own true dragon name to him. The small dragon stays paralyzed and totally surprised upon realizing that he was cornered by that unexpected proposal from the tutor. Perdition explains that sharing the true name between dragons is the ultimate proof that they are absolute and trusted allies. The young redhead completes saying that this mutual trust is essential, since from now on the small one will be like his younger brother. The Prota pretends to agree in a simple way and says that he understands, but deep down stays quite suspicious of that sudden attitude. He knows that the youth will not like such a short response, but there is nothing to do since he does not comprehend the motive for so much haste. The small one reflects that, if that were an order from Phaseus, the leader never would let the son make a proposal of equality so generous. This means that the idea started solely from Perdition himself, leaving the mystery of why he is in such a hurry. Suddenly, an idea arises in the Prota's mind, and he widens his eyes upon realizing something very important about the tutor. The small one asks directly if the youth is doing all this just because he wants soon to become a sworn brother of his. He questions in a fun way if the motive for so much insistence would truly be a reason as childish and cute as that one. Totally embarrassed and red, the youth stammers, saying that he was not in such a hurry, confirming that the small one hit dead on. The youth tries to justify himself, speaking of the political importance of being allied to the heir, revealing extra information just out of pure nervousness, wishing to change the subject quickly. The redhead asks to forget that and focus on the class. Now that the bird's name has already been decided, he begins to explain the lesson, teaching that the dragons are a race considered the true origin of the elements that form the world. Thanks to this, they managed to conjure the magic of the words to grant the base of existence itself and define the beginning of a destiny. The young tutor affirms that, in the exact moment when the small one gave the name of Baegya to the bird, he opened a magical path for that bird. For that reason, he alerts that one must have a lot of care with promises made using names, as one never knows the destiny that this can generate. The small dragon smiles and thinks that, although he failed in the past, creating and molding destinies used to be his greatest specialty. He recalls bitterly that he spent 1,000 years accumulating virtues to ascend, but everything was ruined by an ordinary human of short life. The proto reflects if that would truly be possible, since destiny itself always demands a strictly equivalent exchange to act. He ponders that, for being humans of short lives, they could have distorted their paths by creating infinite ramifications in destiny. However, to become a legendary divine beast, it is extremely necessary to accumulate an inevitable and transcendent strength over time. It is for that reason that the few who manage to tread that path are rare, and when destiny begins to flow, it does not change so easily. But, contraring all established laws and rules of the spiritual world, the grand destiny that he built ended up broken. The small dragon looks ahead and admits to himself that it would be a lie to say that he carries no regret from that time. He closes his eyes and decides that it is no use trying to resolve this mystery now. Right when Perdition calls his attention all of a sudden, Perdition asks with what the small one is daydreaming and wants to know if he is really paying attention to the lesson. The little boy says that it is nothing and that he is listening, but the tutor challenges him to repeat exactly what he just said. The small one repeats without error that, to become an elder, it is necessary to have skill and impose fear to keep others under control. Perdition admits that that is a totally outdated ideology, saying it out loud, and recognizes that the small one really was listening. The youth remembers that his father taught him to crush others with power and fear so that no one ever dares to rise above him. The little boy thinks that this harsh style could serve for Phaseus in the time of war, but definitely does not match Perdition. The proto knows that even if he says this openly, the tutor will not listen and stays thinking about what he should do to help him. Suddenly, Perdition asks in a sincere way if the small dragon did not get upset with the harsh way he spoke, before the little boy gets surprised and counters asking why he would get upset, highlighting that the tutor is a very strong warrior. The youth agrees, but does not understand the relation, and the small one reveals that, instead of upset, in truth he thought the tutor felt lonely. He explains that, even when things are difficult, his subordinates just endure everything quiet and follow his orders. The small one says that those servants are loyal, but for being subordinates, they never will converse openly with him when he is sad. He shows Baegya and says that, although it is his subordinate, the bird is free and very honest to express what it likes or not. The small one points out that, by the tutor's history, it seems that he has no one like the small bird by his side. Leaving the youth shaken, Perdition turns his gaze away and says that he does not care about that, affirming that the members of his clan never would be intimate that way. The proto understands the situation and realizes that the clan leader must have crushed the servants so that they never thought otherwise. He knows that it is still too early to judge Phaseus as someone bad because of this, as intelligent creatures are complex. The small one reflects that living beings have many facets, like a rich landowner who loves his daughter from the bottom of his heart, but who at the same time can be extremely cruel and relentless with the humble workers who take care of his lands. He remembers also the ancient legend of the god who brought the secret of fire to help save and guide humanity, but who, to the other gods of the pantheon, that same divinity was seen only as a great unforgivable traitor. The small one concludes that the young tutor also has two sides, and decides that it is worth changing his perception very slowly from now on. He asks if the tutor learned this point of view with someone, and the young redhead confirms in a simple way that, yes, Perdition praises his father for being firm like a mountain, and the small one notes that the youth only speaks well of the lessons transmitted by Christina's memories. The clan leader used to divide people into positions and discard mercilessly whoever did not reach their goals. Although the leader has noble and correct objectives, he is the type of person capable of doing absolutely anything to achieve them. While a chess piece rolls along the table, the small dragon comments in a polite way that the youth's father must be an incredible man. Perdition approaches and admits with pride that even he himself recognizes the great military achievements of his father in the past. The small dragon picks up the chess piece from the floor and decides to make a very direct and personal question to the young redhead tutor. He asks if the youth really likes having a father with that personality so rigid and relentless in daily life. The young tutor changes expression immediately and says in a sharp way for the small one not to stay making useless questions. He warns that they still need to continue the magic class, and the little boy merely agrees and decides to end the subject for now. The small one notes the evident discomfort of Perdition and thinks that that defensive reaction already was a clear enough response. Even after this tense mood, the youth continues going to give the classes, and, with time, the small dragon finally learns telepathy. This facilitates a lot the communication between them, although the small dragon in the original form still causes amazement in the tutor sometimes. With the conversation more fluid, the lessons advance fast, and Perdition begins to think in secret that his young disciple is a true genius today. Perdition presents a new practical exercise with Mana and explains that they are going to play a magical version of Cat's Cradle. The young tutor says that he will do the demonstration first and asks for the small one to pay a lot of attention to his movements. He begins to channel his magical energy with a lot of delicacy, making arise a thin, bright string of mana between his fingers. The small dragon observes fixedly the reddish glow of the string and begins to understand the structure of that mana control technique. The tutor explains that it is necessary to maintain the thickness of the string very uniform and alerts that the exercise is difficult and demands a lot of concentration. He tells the small one to try too, and the proto realizes that the training is identical to the children's game he knew in his past life. With plenty of calm and focus, the little boy begins to mold and stretch his own magical energy to form the first lines of the game. Perdition stays with arms crossed and totally shocked upon seeing the result, demanding for the small one to say the truth once and for all. He asks suspicious if that is not his first time doing this, but the small one guarantees that it truly is his debut in the training. In thought, the little boy admits only that he had already tried to play with something quite similar in his previous life on Earth. He displays with pride the perfect pattern he created and reinforces in thought that, in this new current life, it is indeed his first time. The tutor stays with no reaction before the small one's genius. While the bird Bagia takes advantage to play joyfully with the magical strings, the small one reflects that whoever developed this training method did an excellent pedagogical work for the education of children. He finds it incredible to have adapted the play into a well-organized magic circle, while Perdition wonders if he brought the training in vain. The small one says excited that he found the play fun, and Perdition gets awkward agreeing timidly with him. The little boy asks if it was Phaseus who taught him the game, but the redhead hesitates and denies timidly, with his head remembering his father. Perdition reveals that the play in truth was taught by his mother, Kuzuna, leaving the small one quite surprised upon hearing that name. The small one perceives that the youth speaks of his mother with a lot of naturalness, and notes that the barrier in his heart decreases upon touching that subject. He comprehends that this is the real motive for the youth being so generous with him, despite his strong and difficult temperament in daily life. It is a case of pure empathy for someone who went through a similar trauma of loss, or maybe even through a greater pain in childhood. The proto feels that he can use this connection, and decides to investigate in a subtle way deeper into the deceased, Lady Kuzuna. The small one asks how she was, commenting with a sad tone that he does not know for real how it is to have a real mother or father by his side. He says that Christina does not touch the subject, so as not to upset him. For that reason, he would like a lot to hear the memories that the tutor has of his mother. Comprehending the small one's feeling, Perdition gives in and begins to describe his mother as an extremely kind person to him. He tells with affection that she had silver scales and beautiful purple eyes, being a dragon of incomparable and unique beauty in her clan. The redhead remembers that she liked birds a lot, so much that she built her own home very close to the nest of a phoenix. He completes saying that she loved to sing, and that frequently she sang beautiful lullabies for him to sleep peaceful at night. The small one asks if she liked to sing, and the youth confirms that the lullabies are his strongest memory of her. The little boy reflects that it makes total sense for the lullabies to continue etched in the mind of someone even after so much time. Perdition confesses in a sad tone that, in truth, he should remember much more things about his mother, but he cannot. The small one thinks that memories can end up forgotten if we do not think of them with frequency, justifying the youth's difficulty in remembering. Then, the proto realizes that if he wants to make a decisive move to approach the tutor, the perfect hour is now. He extends his hand to the youth and decides to make a very special request to try and cheer him up in some way. The little boy asks if the tutor could not sing a bit of that beautiful lullaby that his mother used to sing to him. Perdition stays completely in silence for an instant, without knowing right how to react to that request so unusual from the small one. The youth soon dismisses the idea, saying that that is a big nonsense, and affirms in a categorical way that he does not sing by any means. The redhead says he has no time for those useless things, preferring to focus on sleeping more to grow, which leaves the small one quite frustrated. Seeing the reaction, the proto feels pity and notes that the youth rejects rest and play in an almost obsessive manner. He decides to use the youth's vulnerability and says with affection that he just got curious because that music seemed very special to him. The small one adds that he never heard a song in his life, and that he would like to listen to the music of the tutor's mother to feel her love and thought. The proto reflects that those words are not just an excuse to convince the youth to sing to him. He knows that Kuzuna's memories show how much she loved him, and makes the redhead think about how a mother's love is something precious. The young tutor begins to tremble his hands and stammers a bit, feeling that the small dragon may be right about all that. The proto analyzes that, if the youth compares the rigid father with the loving mother, he will feel a strong rejection for the father's treatment. Even if the youth says to himself that he respects his father, deep down he does not want to place that cold man on the same level as his sweet mother. This brutal difference between maternal love and paternal coldness is what will finally open Perdicion's eyes in the future. In the past, his father fought with him for wasting time with songs, blaming coldly the deceased mother for teaching him that way. The leader complained with anger that even training hard was not enough, and that singing only would leave him weak to be manipulated by others. He said cruel words, affirming that he already foresaw a future where the people would die for having a weak and lazy leader like his son. On that fateful day, the cruel words of his father tore the boy's heart like a dagger, making him cry desperately. It was at that painful moment that the young heir learned that whoever seeks only pleasure is a coward, fleeing from the reality of the world. He realized also that, for being too weak, he had no strengths, even to defend the honor of his beloved mother against his father's insults. Since then, to gain respect, the youth started to train without rest, burying all emotions that could make him weak. Proving his value in this so lonely and painful way, the boy ended up losing the very path of his life in the process. With this, he lost the capacity to smile even when he was praised, feeling that nothing of that really mattered anymore to him. Due to this past, the gentle and sincere words of the small dragon touched so deeply the hardened heart of the redhead. The youth comments timidly that it makes a long time since he sings, accepting to make a decision that normally he never would accept to do. The small dragon looks at him with eyes sparkling and asks surprised if the tutor really decided to try and sing the music. The redhead merely looks back with a countenance much softer, confirming in silence that he will make this rare concession for him. He takes a deep breath for a moment and finally opens his mouth to begin humming the first verses of the sweet maternal melody. The youth begins to sing about missing the sky and the return home to rest the tired wings after a long journey of flight. While the redhead sings about the sunset, the small one stays amazed with his talent, but suddenly feels something very strange in the air. The song continues guiding the steps through a path of red roses and deciphering the great hidden mystery behind the blue door. Upon chanting the verses about the labyrinth of memories, a strong energy arises and reveals that that definitely is no ordinary song. The small one notices that the mana is circulating in a steady flow and begins to suspect what really is happening there. He comprehends that the song is a magic of the words, made to truly connect the heart of whoever listened to it. While the melody continues, an uncontrollable and heavy sleep begins to take over the small dragon, who barely manages to stay awake. He ends up falling into deep sleep on the floor beside his bird, leaving Perdition desperate, calling for Lady Christina.